Polaris does a spacewalk. What's next for Starliner? China does a hop, and you probably won't like why Starship is actually delayed. But if you can't take the heat, get out of the flame trench.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roger, planet.
Water towers, fly! Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside FD off. Bring in FD off. It's orange!
Orange 25! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
What is it?
Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You good? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Was that like a cold open or a hot open? I don't know what that was. I made that up at the last second. How's it going, folks? Thank you for joining us. It's Friday, so you know it is time for the Flame Trench. It's our weekly live news talk show where we tell you our opinions about what's been going on with the news, smattered with facts and other things that are happening. Let me know in chat if you can hear me. Of course, I'm Das, John Galloway for NSF here. I see some folks putting 5x5s into the chat. I'm going to assume that you can hear what I'm saying. You like that? If you don't like the heat, get out of the flame trench. Has anybody said that before? Certainly that's been used before. I cannot imagine that Jackson or EJ or somebody has never said that. But anyways, that is our plan. We've got some folks with us here today. Joining me, Mr. Sawyer Rosenstein. Sawyer, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and to my knowledge, that is the first time that has been used on the flame trench. And I am both ecstatic
Nice.
and also mad that we haven't thought of that earlier.
How did we not think of that? Jeez.
Oh no, that was brilliant.
Good to have you on this show, Sawyer. Thanks for tuning in. How you feeling? Feeling better?
Yeah, getting better week by week. Still flat for the show, but hopefully that'll change sooner than later.
There's a pun in there somewhere, but I'll leave the puns to you for now. Who else do we have on the show in here today? Let's see who's... Oh, it's D. D
Hello,
Wise,
hello.
how's it going?
It is going really well. I don't have the fancy backgrounds. I've got a normal outdoor scene behind me here. But yeah, a lot of stuff has happened in space this week, and I am happy to be on the show and discussing it.
Nice green screen there. Jeez.
Yeah.
It's literally like, oh no, yeah, the moon landing was staged, but the easiest way to do it was to go to the moon to actually film it there. That was the whole setup, right?
I don't have the energy to set up a green screen. Come on.
It's like easier just to go outside and point the camera at the VAB and sit in front of it, right?
Absolutely.
All right. Are we have one more person. I assume we're going to intro Ryan here at the beginning too. Ryan's going to talk with us during the Starship segment. I don't know if Ryan appears on the screen. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
hey Ryan, how's it going?
I'm going good. Yeah. I'll be here for Starship later, but
You'll be here for Starship.
Yeah. You guys can take the rest of it.
All right, good deal. But that is our cast for the show today. You know the drill. We're live. We're talking about stuff. There's going to be some opinion mixed into it. This isn't like a formal news presentation, like news at 6 or come on. That's not what we're doing. We're here to tell you what we think. We're here to help you understand what was going on in the news. There's going to be a lot of conversation about what goes on. So if you want to join in on the conversation, well, that's what the chat is for. Like over in the chat, tag us in the chat at NASASpaceflight, or just like say stuff in the chat because I'm going to read the chat while we're doing the show. But anyways, that is the plan for today. Are there any other like housekeeping things I'm supposed to do at the beginning of the show, y'all? I think I'm good, right?
No, I guess just say we're not Sean Evans, but it might get spicy.
All right, cool. So anyways... What? Let's
because he hosts Hot Ones, so it might get spicy.
I mean, but what am I supposed to do with that? Like, Let's
Start the show.
hop into the news. Where are Jack and EJ?
Speaking
Jack and
of
EJ here.
spicy topics,
Yes, yeah, right. Jack and EJ taking the week off, or not the week off, just taking Friday off here. They will be back. Don't worry. We're just mixing up the cast on the show here a little bit. But we're going to start, as I look at the other screen over here to see where we're going to start, Starliner. Yes, so we know that Starliner is back on the ground. We had a press conference earlier today from Butch and Sunny aboard the ISS. Butch's hair there almost getting as long as Sunny's hair. Got a little bit to go, but let's talk about what's going on here. The topic is going to be what's next. Is Starliner going to fly again? Are we going to get another mission out of it? Sawyer, I know you did a little bit of looking here, but what are we looking at for Starliner?
That is a great question. As of right now, it made it back safely after that press conference. Boeing was not there, but the crew indeed was asked about that, of what their thoughts were seeing the spacecraft leave without them.
Yeah.
Butch being very diplomatic about it, uh, saying that they're used to long deployments, and while it was great to ride it up, it was a little bittersweet to see it go, but they've crawled inside Dragon to get used to it and see what it's all about, and they knew that might be possible given this is a test flight. They
Yeah.
were also asked about the fact that, hey, you were on all the calls when they were deciding whether or not to actually make it home, and what was your input and what were your thoughts on it? But trying to be very diplomatic, saying those discussions will come out soon. There was definitely disagreements, he said, but it was a technical and spirited conversation in that way. Not
Huh.
like, oh my gosh, it was crazy fighting, but their input was indeed heard, and that's something they will discuss more once they're on the ground. But their input was noted as they were discussing that. So
Was
he
noted.
tried not yeah, he tried not to answer a lot of questions about that, the whole, "Do you still trust Boeing? Do you still trust Starliner?" All of that. He was very diplomatic about it, in that they knew it was a test flight. That's part of why he wore his naval training shirt, was the whole point that this is a training exercise, and why Sunny wore her NASA meatball shirt, because they believe in the call that the agency made. So a little symbolism there in what they were wearing in addition. And by the way, shout out to Matthew Dominic for managing to capture the re-entry from the International Space Station.
Yeah, that popped up on the stream, and we're like, "What is that's a very straight line? What camera is that from?" And then we found out with a Nikon overlay on the screen that it was actually from the space station, like one of the cameras plugged into an encoder streaming that reentry of the plasma trail live, right? Um,
Exactly.
so the Boeing representatives didn't show up for the press conference, and I know there was a lot about that. Did we have any like scuttlebutt or opinion on why they might not show up? Was like their take going to be too spicy for NASA to allow at the press conference? Or what do we think happened there? Like, why would they not show up at the press conference?
The official word was that the Boeing officials deferred to NASA for the press conference. That
Deferred
is the
to
most
NASA.
that's the most non-answer I've heard in a while, but yes, that was the official wording, was that they deferred to NASA. I think it's very possible that it might have gotten spicy
Yeah,
and maybe detracted away from it, because they were the dissenting opinion.
I
Like
don't
we had
doubt
heard in
it.
that previous press conference, that
Yeah, yeah.
NASA was unanimous, "Send them home." Boeing was, "Let's use our spacecraft."
Interesting. So I really wonder, D. Let's get D over here. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on this? Like, there's a press conference. You're going to be there. Maybe you say what you're going to say in the press conference, and people don't like it or they don't want to hear it. So you say, "Fine, I won't show up." Like, what do you think happened with Boeing not showing up at that press conference?
yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. We know that Boeing has remained confident in Starliner this whole time,
Yeah,
and with the landing, we saw it landed.
it
Like
landed.
so their confidence and those technical disagreements were certainly, uh, I'm sure, the forefront of that conversation. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it was to the point of they're like, okay, we've been saying we're confident in this. You're not hearing us out. You're not saying you don't feel confident in us.
Yeah.
so we won't be there, but they're being diplomatic about their choice, because I once it landed, it could have been a hey, told you so type thing, and we've definitely seen that sort of disagreement online. We've seen people saying, hey, the spacecraft worked, they were ready, the astronauts should have come home on it, and Boeing was confident in that. And so I'm I, it's hard to say.
Yeah.
um
That's fair.
I,
Like I think that that's fair.
it's definitely more professional for them to take a step back rather than go in there and guns blazing saying, hey, we knew that this was going to be all right, and we wanted this to happen, and it didn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You know, if it was me, I'm curious, right? Um, Clearly they had an opportunity to say, "I told you so." There's a lot back and forth about why the decision was made, and potentially it was still the right decision, even though it worked out the way that it did. Right? Capsule came home perfectly fine, no issue. But if you were just going to defer to NASA, you could show up to the press conference and be like, "Yeah, hey, we did what NASA asked us. We deferred to NASA, whatever." It's almost like what's the right terminology I'm looking for? Like you're protesting by not showing up or whatever. Like, oh yeah, I could show up and just toe the line, but I'm going to make a statement by not showing up, because what else could they say? It's either, oh, we defer to NASA, or we told you so. We wanted them to come home. It would have been fine. And y'all, NASA engineers, media blew it out of proportion. And now they're up there without coming home on the capsule. Like, I don't know what else they could have said. So maybe discretion
yeah,
is the better part of valor there.
yeah, it's a tough situation, because even if they were confident, there was that disagreement. And I said it before return, and I'll say it again. It's like the right choice was made. Err on the side of caution, make the responsible engineering decisions, even if they're they know, like, okay, it did land successfully. Okay, but we played it safe,
Yeah.
and not putting humans on the line there when there is another option. They have the crew 9, they have crew 8 with the seats in the cargo currently, if um, necessary. So they had the option. They have ways to get them back. So if there is that dissenting opinion, it makes sense to play that safe route.
I guess
Yeah.
I think. Go ahead, Sawyer. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say one of the things that they talked about today as well aboard the ISS of, the whole what was your thought when it landed safely? They basically said, it's tough to see your spacecraft leave without you on it when you're a test pilot, but
Yep.
they were very happy to see that it made it back safely. They didn't say whether they wish they were on board it or not when it returned home. Again, the whole trying to be diplomatic thing, but they were very happy to see it land, and they, expect it to fly again. In
Yeah.
terms of what changes they might suggest for the future, that's something that they plan on talking with Boeing engineers about when they come back.
Look at Starliner. Look at Starliner in the video. Like, oh yeah, you think my thrusters don't work? Like all the thrusters firing here. It's like backing away from the station. Like, let me show you my thrusters, ye of little faith. Chat wants to get on into this. Apparently, Chat thinks they're going to be spicy as well. So I'm going to scroll through some of this and see what Chat has to say about this. Massimo says, the "I told you so" argument is so stupid. Shuttle landed safely many times until it didn't. Massimo, Dragon landed safely many times until it didn't. You can say that about anything, right? And the only thing you really have there is hindsight. So it's tough. Like, there is always going to be a balance between taking risks. The safest thing for us to do is not go to space, just stay at home, right? So if you're never going to take any risk at all, Dragon would have never flown. Dragon would have never had the opportunity to carry people either, and we would just sit here eating our Cheerios, not going to space, right? On the other end, if too many things go wrong, and you have this really obvious that you have to find the balance between the two things, right? But I don't think that "I told you so" is an immature thing to say. But "I told you so" is the same as "the evidence shows here's the outcome," right? Like, it's just it's a maturity thing on how you position it. So we spiced it up a little bit. We say I told you so. I don't know that Boeing would have come in there and said I told you so. I saw some people talking about Boeing trying to dodge difficult questions, and I'll ask you. I'm reading chat, right? What difficult questions did Boeing dodge? Like, if somebody asked them a difficult question, they would just, here's the capsule. I don't know. What's your difficult question? It's on the ground, just fine, like we said it was going to be. Like, it helped me out because I'm going to read some chat here. What difficult questions did Boeing dodge by not going to the press conference? Sawyer,
Um,
D, anybody?
I mean, they always have
I
the
mean,
option of giving a no comment. Like I've heard no comment answers before. I've received no comment answers, and so
Yeah.
it's I wouldn't be surprised if they were frustrated by the hostility of headlines, perhaps by some of the mainstream media and the uh, the way a lot of that was portrayed. And so, but then again, a no comment answer is an answer in itself, and so
It's like
it's
if you
so
choose not
hard
to
to say.
comment, still you've commented, right?
Absolutely,
To
absolutely.
paraphrase the
It's a
song.
if it wasn't going to be a good like if they had a good answer, an answer that would make them look good, okay, they would provide an answer. If they say no comment, uh, whether or not you like to say it, it can be assumed that perhaps it's not the best look to say that. And so, yeah, I would have loved if Boeing had been on all the press conferences, because like this isn't the first press conference they have not been on, and getting that communication out with the public, even if there are hard questions, I think it would be good. And I'm always in favor of that longer, more communication, answer the questions, have more press conferences, share as much, because we're not going to understand Boeing's take on all of this if they don't say it and they're not there. So we are hearing what NASA and what the astronauts have to say, but we're not hearing Boeing's uh, Boeing's statement on this, and that's something I would genuinely like to know because, like we said, Starliner successfully landed. It did prove it landed, even though it like had the thruster issues on the way up. There was that questioning. So
Yeah. I think I'm really curious, right? To be fair, right? It did have what did it have? It had one thruster issue on the way down. The thrusters are intentionally redundant, so one thruster issue wasn't a big deal. If you want to like, oh geez, it had one more thruster issue. Like, is it a duty cycle thing? They could manage the thrusters by duty cycling them less. Would there be any sort of emergency maneuver? There shouldn't be any emergencies or surprises, right? But would the thrusters have still performed as admirably if they had to do some sort of more extreme maneuver? We don't know those answers. We know that the way that they got it down, the thrusters, for the most part, worked fine. One issue with the thruster, they're redundant for a reason, et cetera, right? But I'm still very curious. I don't. I'd love to see the backroom comment there, or the backroom conversation that kept or that had Boeing make the decision. Like, you know something, if you're not going to let us speak our piece, we're not coming to this press conference. That's the only thing I can think about. Like, NASA said, hey, we don't want to get into that. And Boeing's like, if you don't let us speak our truth after this proof is on the ground, we're not even going to show up. Is that professional? I don't know. I don't know. I've been in situations like that before, and I've opted to speak my piece with somebody hovering over the microphone switch to turn me off if they didn't like what I said. Is that better than not showing up? I don't know.
I mean,
But
here's the
Sawyer,
problem with
go.
that, in my opinion, is the fact that the days prior, they put out a press release stating that there will be a press conference afterwards, to request dial-in info, and it lists participants. There were 2 Boeing participants listed.
Yep.
So they were originally scheduled to be there. If it was just they weren't scheduled, they didn't show up, that's a totally different story from, "Hey, we told the media these 2 people were gonna be here." And you've got
Yeah.
one of the heads at Boeing and then Mark Nappy, who's been the one that's been discussing all of this pretty much since day 1, and neither of them actually came to the briefing. In fact, they edited the press
Oh
release
yeah.
the day before to remove their names from existence.
Like it's so weird. Like they were supposed to be there, and what was the backroom discussion that caused them not to show up? And the only thing, y'all, like put other ideas in chat if you have anything else. But the only thing I can think is, oh no, we want to keep it peaceful and on topic. Let's not go there. And Boeing's like, dang right, we want to go there. Why are you not going to let us say this in the press conference? I don't know. I just try to think of other things that might be the reasoning why they would sort of piece out of the press conference like that. But y'all, this is the flame trench. Like, this is how we talk about this stuff here. We're not trying to be like, and yes, they were on there, then they weren't, and that's the end. Like, offering up opinions. I'm going to play a little devil's advocate too. Like, I still think that they potentially made the right decision, because the stakes were very high. And remember, oh my gosh, Garrett said they didn't have to take the risk. So if you don't have to take the risk, you have another option. All right, there's no reason to, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to offer like a dissenting opinion just to make sure we're thinking through stuff, right? Not everybody's comfortable with that, and not everybody likes that. I want to hit one more comment here, Kevin, and I'm gonna pull Kevin here. Kevin's producing the show today. The thruster activity. When we pulled away from the station, is it a huge problem if I ask that we look at that thruster activity again? And I'll tell you why. I'm going to talk very slowly because I'm causing a problem for Kevin asking for that video again, right? But in chat, somebody in chat has said, after all that exciting thruster activity was caught on video after undocking, it makes me wonder if there were thruster malfunctions. And I think there's like a framing, like a mental framing thing here, right? For reasons, people have been framed to think that Starliner has problems, right? And so you see a video of Starliner backing away from the station. Here you go. Thank you, Kevin. I know I called Kevin out on that, but you see a video of Starliner backing away, and you're like, wow, that's Starliner. That doesn't look right. Geez, look at that spacecraft. It's totally broken. The thrusters are firing, right? Well, let's go back and look at a Dragon firing that way. We don't have that ready, but we probably should. If you've got it written in your brain that Starliner is broken and you see video of it backing away and you see the thrusters firing, and that leads you to believe that Starliner is having a problem because you see the thrusters firing, I really wonder if you watch a Dragon approach or go away from the station, you see the same sort of stuff. How does that do it? But the conversation here is about, I see something and I make an assumption about that spacecraft. And maybe that's not really based on facts. Maybe it's just the way that the media or the way that the conversation has framed that in my brain, because I think that was a big part of what was going on with Starliner here. So,
I think
it's a
part of
spicy
it
frame trench. Go ahead.
I think part of why it also looked maybe different to some people who have seen Dragon or anything like that before is the
Yeah.
fact that they weren't using all of the thrusters. They shut down the thrusters in the rear and were just using those forward-facing thrusters to back up. So maybe instead of it being a little more evenly dispersed, so you're not getting all these super rapid fire ones just in the front as opposed to the whole spacecraft, that might be part of the reason why.
Yeah. This is a thing that happens, right? And I've noticed this happening quite a bit across spaceflight. Everybody has their fans. They get these notions, and sometimes they fight against things not based on facts but based on emotion, right? And sometimes they fight for things based on not facts but emotions. It happens a lot, and it's okay to identify when that happens. I'm not saying people are right or wrong or you can't have favorites or whatever. But just think about that. Like, take these two things, and because that is Starliner, you assume that you see a thruster firing, and that's a problem because Starliner has problems, right? Eh, Personally, I try to step back and cognizantly like be aware of preconceptions and notions and stuff like that that either form in my own brain or people try to stuff into my brain, right? Because you should think this, right? Anyways, I'm on the flame trench. Have we talked about this enough? What's next? That's what we were supposed to talk about. What's next, Sawyer? Are we going to get another Starliner flight? A couple more paid for? Or is it going to go in like 2028 or what?
Again, going back to that one press conference prior where they flat out said there is a 100% chance it will fly again. That was according to NASA administrator, senator, astronaut, everything,
Right.
Bill Nelson. Um, it sounds like they will definitely try and fly it again. The question is whether it's actually going to fly in the currently planned time slot of August 2025. They have released a
That's
patch for SpaceX Crew 10. That doesn't
Wow.
mean that they're gonna go Crew 9, Crew 10, Crew etc. in a row. It could be Crew 9, Starliner 1, then Crew 10. But if I were a betting man, just opinion-wise,
Yeah.
I think that it will fly again in 2026, but not next year.
Not in 2025, but in 2026. I
Right.
like I like seeing things fly. I mean, I want things to fly. We need to take some risks. Boeing certainly has a lot of answers. Figure out what the heck is wrong with the valve and the seals. Like seriously, there's got to be some way you can figure that out, mitigate it, design around it, whatever. I don't. You got to be able to solve the problem. So somebody just needs to do it.
One other note, we did talk about the one of 12 thrusters that did fail. But there was also increased temperatures on some of the others. So they had adjusted the limits for that return because they had seen that heating on the way up.
Yep.
They'd done that testing. They knew to expect that. So the software was changed for return so that those limits would not inhibit the thrusters.
Yeah, and D, that's where I was going. Like, they had a nominal return, but did they use all the capacity they might need for a wide range of situations, right? Like, you can turn the thrusters down, you can duty cycle them differently so that they don't hit the heat limits, they don't heat soak as much, you don't have the seal problems, whatever, right? You could change that to some extent with your algorithm or the way that you actually turn them on, right? But would that limit them so much that, if we really needed to do this, the thrusters wouldn't perform to the limits they need to? I don't know that information. Like, I don't have that info, but just looking at it and saying, hey, why don't we just duty cycle them 50% less and it'll take us longer to do these maneuvers or whatever. We have limited attitude control capacity or whatever the right way to say it. So at the end of the day, it got home safely. So I think there's a lot more questions to be asked. But anyways, shall we move on to the next topic?
I do, before we go, just want to give one shout out to Butch, who has grown his hair out since he's been on space station. He said it's the longest that he's had it since college, and also pointing out, since he was next to Sonny Williams, who has the longer hair, saying that he had the, quote, second best hair in the frame.
The second best hair in frame. Nice.
So just shout out to them actually being hysterical.
Nice. Hey, a couple other, speaking of shout outs, right? A couple other shout outs. Got a super chat that came through from Bideford. Says Sawyer, or for Sawyer, all of our prayers are still with you for healing quickly during your surgery. Going to keep sending hugs and pun tokens to keep you smiling. Now slam us all with a good pun. Totally on the spot.
Oh no.
You have been granted a pun token. Here, use it wisely.
No, D would be the one to use it wisely.
Oh.
That's what you use your pun token on?
I mean,
really?
So
I'm sure
unoriginal. You know how often I hear that.
Well, thank you though.
So much.
I am indeed recovering from surgery though, for the people that were asking in chat, which is why if I look flat, yes, is because I am indeed flat right now. It's
so
not being lazy.
If his
it's
performance
just,
falls a little bit flat, you know why.
Hey.
Here, take my pun token back. It's all yours. That was
there
good.
There you go. Take the pun token back. A couple gifted memberships as well. Chris W. gifted 5 memberships. RC Horseman tossed 5 in as well. And, well, it's the same logo. That says, this icon. It says Chris W. again for a total of 10. So if you got a gifted membership, say thanks to the folks who gifted it over. All you have to do is be hanging out in chat, and you can get access to the behind-the-scenes content. And we actually do we do a pre-show where we're chatting and hanging out with members beforehand. You have to be in Discord for that, so that's like an upgraded membership. But anyways, now chat, it's like flat Earth. Why is Sawyer not curved? Flat Earth confirmed sort of deal over here. So
Flat Stanley can eat it. I've got one on you.
Is there anything?
Remember the children's book?
Oh my gosh! It's like when you walk around with a little paper cutout, right? I guess the only thing.
I would say I'm on a roll, but I'm actually flat today, so.
No wheels on the bed or anything like that?
Nope.
All right. The only thing we didn't talk about is the contingency situation, and I've seen this one floating around social media quite a bit. Starliner is gone. Butch and Sonny are still on the ISS. If you've heard us talk about the safety protocol for the ISS, it's like, oh, you have to have a ride home. The capsule isn't supposed to leave. There's supposed to be enough seats on the ISS for all the crew members that are currently on the ISS. And we are outside of that condition right now. Because if they need to come home in an emergency, originally while Starliner were there, it was hop on Starliner and come home, right? But now that Starliner's gone, the contingency plan, Sawyer, is to like bum a ride. I guess you can't say bum a ride in the trunk of the Dragon. That would not get you home. What's their contingency plan to get home currently before the next crew mission gets up there to bring them seats and spacesuits?
Yeah, that's a good point. The trunk is jettisoned, so don't ride the trunk.
Don't ride.
Plus it's
Don't try to.
unpressurized.
Don't sneak to space in the trunk of a Dragon. You won't have a good time.
Worse than the wheel well of a plane. But yeah, so they actually have cargo pallets that are kind of underneath the seats. And if they need to leave the ISS in a hurry before Crew 9 comes up, they would actually go into the cargo pallet of Dragon. Basically lay down there. They have some extra cushioning for them, but they would not be suited up, which is
No
not
spacesuit.
ideal. But yeah, the Boeing suits don't work with the Crew Dragon setup, so they would
Yeah.
just be without suits, laying in the cargo pallet for reentry.
Did they send the Boeing spacesuits down with Starliner, or are the Boeing spacesuits still up on station? I actually don't know the answer to that.
I believe they sent them down.
Yep.
Okay. It seems like it would make sense. Like, why you only have so much room? Why keep them cluttering up the station, right, D?
Yeah, I mean there's no use in having them up there once Starliner is leaving. They're not intercompatible with Dragon in that sort of way. So I believe Sunny already has her suit, and Butch's is on the way up for
On the way.
SpaceX's return. I could have had
Yeah.
that flipped around.
You're correct.
The only thing. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying D's correct on that.
The only thing you could use the spacesuits for is like practical jokes that probably go over the limit. Like put one in the airlock and let it outside and have it outside floating past the window or something like that. I think they frown on practical jokes like that on the ISS.
Although someone
Suit
did
set.
say that. I was going to say someone did say now that they're up there, we have 8 months to buy every single person on the planet a gorilla suit to surprise them when they come back.
I saw that on X. Like they land and everybody's dressed in like a gorilla suit or something. Like, what year is it? Okay. Moving right along. A little spicy start there, but that's what we do. We're not trying to like get on to anybody. We just want to have a conversation about this. Yeah, we just want to talk. That's what they say before they like sit you down in the room with all the chairs waiting for you. Polaris. Big news this week. Exciting things going on with the Polaris program. I'm not sure if that's how you spell violin. That's more like violine, but the spacewalk that happened is the things. Polaris, after much ado, successfully launched, and we got to witness, we covered it here live, the spacewalk. Whose name is next to that? It's
I don't
Sawyer.
know. Yeah, sorry, you can't get rid of me.
I'm not trying.
Yeah, let's start off with the whole point that it actually launched, because that has happened since the last Flame Trench episode. So the Flame Trench at 39A got used as Falcon 9 roared to the skies, carrying the crew of 4 up into orbit. Not to the International Space Station, but just in orbit in Dragon Resilience. So for that one, you have Jared Isaacman, Kid Poteet, Sarah Gillis, and Anna Menon is the crew of 4 that are now on board. So after launch, they went into their parking orbit of 190 by 1200 kilometers, then went up and spent about 10 hours or so at 1400 kilometer by 190 kilometer orbit. That is the highest anyone has been since the end of the Apollo program. That also marks the highest that any female has ever gone around orbit of the Earth for both Anna and Sarah. They did their experimentation up there to test how radiation going through the Van Allen belts would affect the spacecraft as well as the crew themselves before dropping down to 190 by 700. Why is that important? Well, then they're not getting hit by radiation as we get the first ever commercial spacewalk ever. So they had to depressurize the entire Dragon capsule all the way down. And as they did, there's the orbits, by the way, starting off with the 1200 and working their way up before working their way down. They said 1396, but they made it up to 1400.7. They actually beat the original plan there by a little bit.
There was a really interesting thread on that. We'll get in, but continue on. Like Jonathan McDowell was talking about these orbits. Continue.
Oh, orbital police coming. We're in
The
trouble.
orbital police were about to pull them over.
So, anyway, we get ready for the spacewalk, or as we've discussed, calling it a stand-up EVA, where they don't fully leave the spacecraft, but they still have to depressurize the entire thing anyway. So, took a little bit. They got rid of all of the air, essentially, inside the Dragon capsule, had their suits at the right pressure, and then opened up the hatch at the top, which I think all of us were a little surprised it actually opened inward, not outward, but
Yeah.
they did so, and we had EV1 as Jared Isaacman, EV2, Sarah Gillis. Jared went out first, and then became the first person to do the private spacewalk where they used the Skywalker. And I guess
I like how you did like hands for that.
the Skywalker, yes.
The Skywalker.
Where they used to test how their spacesuit does. Basically, a lot of quick mobility tests. We're talking a whole big thing of, 15 minutes combined when the two of them completed all of their time up there.
Yeah.
But you could see the beautiful view there from it. And by the way, spoiler, they made it back in successfully and safely.
They did get back in. You said the beautiful view. It was really interesting because earlier on, when Isaacman was first, when EV1 was first going out, you had the Earth behind them, right? And you had the limb of the Terminator, like the day-night line, and it was just a fantastic shot. And they were flying around to the backside. So what we just had on the screen there was just before that disappeared. But through most of the second part of the spacewalk, we didn't actually see the planet or really anything in the background. It was just them sort of in the foreground. And then like this was the suit cam, the helmet cam. I don't know if this is the first one or the second one there. I can't quite see.
Looks like the first one.
Yeah, that's the first one. I was trying to look at the clock. So, did their spacewalk, Sawyer?
Yes. They did, and it was, yeah, like you were talking about, a little strange that they did it right on the Terminator there between day and night, and then poor Sarah out there looked like she was in one of those one-man shows in New York where it's just a black curtain behind you, when it was actually the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah.
As they kind of went out of range, but this was the view that Jared had coming out first.
That's the helmet cam view of the Earth.
Absolutely
Good.
beautiful.
I mean, we did this live and we were just sort of like staring at it like, wow, like it was really cool. I want to do this though. I want to have an honest conversation about Polaris Dawn, and I want to hear from chat, okay? Because we look back to Gemini and all the other things, the Apollo EVAs and all these things that happened, right? And I want chat to tell me, I haven't staged this or asked this in advance or anything like that. Make no mistake, this was important and needed to happen. But tell us in chat, what were your impressions? Your honest impressions. And there's a wide range. There's no wrong answers. Well, maybe there's some wrong answers. But we'll decide which are the wrong answers. Wait, before we give ours, all right? Before we give ours, I want chat to tell us what they thought. Let's not have our conversation comment or color what chat thinks. I want to see what chat says. I'm just going to read some out. All right, this is risky. Polaris Dawn is literally peak. Let's see. From here, Ursula looks like a perfect view. We got to give them a second so they can catch up.
While they're doing that, by the way, shout out to Sarah Gillis, who, again, I keep mentioning this, but I flew with her in zero gravity on zero-G plane in support of Astro Access, which is meant to help prove that people with disabilities can indeed fly in space. So check out astroaccess.org for more on that, too.
Excellent. I was going to make like a pun thing, but then you went serious with it. So, yes, that is a very important thing. It's like, thanks for stalling for me, Sawyer. Well, we give chat some time to answer.
You're welcome.
But it is a real thing. No, it's not a joke. It is a real thing. The Astro Access program is fantastic. We've had a chance to do an interview with some of the folks that were on that. Sawyer was there too, right, Sawyer?
I was one of those people, yeah. 1 week after I was hired.
So let me read some chat reactions here, some chat comments on this. Moldy Space Industries' impression was, "Dang, I'm tired." I think we all felt that way. It was a very long night. Heart attack. Okay, so Booster 1058 says your heart must have been pounding or something. We loved the perfect world quote. It was amazing and cool, super emotionally moved, so epic. Falcon's Maze, I was in awe when he came out of the hatch. Wesley Hale, I asked for honest opinions. A little boring, but with exciting implications. There's a thread that I want to pull on here, Wesley, but okay. Pretty cool, iconic. Sorry the Pacific Ocean was so dark, I think. Disappointed that Earth was not in the daylight background, Anthony Monaghan said there. Polaris Dawn is the beginning of planetary independence via human technology. Mary Ann, that's a good one. Gwen Ever, I think all 4 of them should have gone out of the capsule, even if it was just for a couple of minutes. I can't read them all. I'm going through these. There's a lot of positive things. There's a lot of people positive. A couple people saying that the views, like they were surprised or lightly disappointed by the views. Bideford said, I cried when Jared exited. This is the beginning of something special. I think that is the truth on the whole thing. John Cook, amazing but underwhelming. God, let me see. There's no way that I could crew him on. Nikki said, I thought they were going to get further out of the vehicle than they did, but understand why they didn't. Still cool. So some of you haven't even watched the whole stream back. You should go back and watch the whole thing. Don't just watch the highlight reel. Watch like as it happened live. Let's go around the horn here and give our own opinions on it. And like I said, make no mistake, this was important. It needed to be done. The purpose of the exercise is not to detract from Polaris Dawn at all. The purpose of the exercise is how did it match your expectations? D, you wanted to start, so let's hear from D.
I sure did. So I certainly agree with the tired. That was the first of 2, what will become 3 all-nighters this week for spaceflight stuff. So the tired is up there. I made it home in time to watch the EVA. And I already knew that the EVAs were going to be short. They weren't going the entire way out of the capsule. I knew all of that. At the same time, as much as I was excited knowing how much the Polaris program has, I was just a tiny bit disappointed there because they were like roughly 7.5 minutes apiece, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
And not leaving the capsule totally didn't bother me, but so much of it was at night, and I would have loved. I'm sure they had all their technical reasons for the timing that they had. I would have loved to have had the Earth visibly in the background that entire time, rather than just the black of the planet's shadow. And
Yeah.
7 minutes for the EVA felt like, I mean, I was thinking like 10 and 15 minutes in my mind, and so I was that tiny bit disappointed. But at the same time, these are new suits. They are working towards much bigger things, and we saw it with both of them. They got partially out of the capsule, and they jumped right in to that testing regime, figuring out how much they could move, how far they could reach, things that SpaceX needs to know, because they can test these in a vacuum, but in a vacuum in 0G, not nearly so easy. So they're doing that testing. They also have all the tech. They have the heads-up display, the different helmet, and there was so much cool stuff. And so I feel like I would have had an even better time and been more excited if I had not had that level of exhaustion.
Yeah.
But it was still exciting the entire time to see that, to know these are private citizens, and it was just crazy to me. They're venting the entire capsule. All
Oh,
four
yeah.
of them are in a vacuum. Like, of course, that's how they have to do it here. They don't have that airlock. But it was exciting to keep up with that. We just had a launch, and the first thing I did when the stream ended was jump over to the EVA, because if I hadn't been at that launch, that was a stream I wanted to be on.
Yeah, because you were out there working the Bluebird launch. You had
Yes.
gone out to deploy cameras, and we did a separate live stream of that. So you were sort of running from the Bluebird launch to the Polaris Dawn EVA.
Yeah, and another piece on Polaris, I went into the night of launch fully not expecting a launch. Just not at all. There was no chance.
Yeah.
I was turned 90 degrees that way, and the weather was just not looking good. We knew the recovery conditions, all of that, were not going to be good. And so the fact that they got off the ground and we get to see this EVA, they don't have to deal with the pad conflicts, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
This mission is an incredibly exciting one. And the thing bringing it down is just my anticipation of the launch and the EVA, and then eventually the return being so high that I perhaps had slightly higher expectations than reasonable, or than we should have had. Because like we knew going in that it was going to be a like 2-hour operation, with the EVA being a short duration of that. So.
Yeah. Sawyer, how about you? Expectations, Polaris Dawn expectations versus reality.
Oh gosh. I mean, here's my thinking. I expected it to be short, but it definitely felt shorter, because I believe we were originally told 15 to 20 minutes each, when it ended
That's
up
what I
being
thought.
15 to 20 minutes total for both of them. I also feel like Sarah got a little shortchanged because they had her checking the seal. It looked like something was bulging near the hatch, which, again, I get that's significant because you need to be able to actually close it and breathe once again afterwards. But at least Jared, when he was done, got to stand out there for like 30, 40 seconds and just look. Sarah got out there and they had her combining tasks because they just had her get back in so quickly.
Yeah.
The
And
other
nothing to see
thing-
at the time.
Right, that's what drove me the craziest, is that I get, they had a set amount of oxygen. That was what drove their decision to stay out as long as they did and come back as quick as they did.
Yep.
They could have maybe started it either a little bit later or a little bit earlier, because you had night, and not only night, you had nothing to view. I don't care if it's night and you get, the city lights in the background. That's something that, if they wanted to have a greater outreach with this and show the planet, that's one way to do it. And on top of that, they also had Sarah's in a spot which was in a dangerous blackout. So
Yeah.
you had it over the ocean where there was no lights, and then you did it in an area where halfway through her spacewalk, you lost all video coverage for about 10, 15 minutes because there was nowhere nearby. They weren't using the Starlink for this, for communication wise.
That's disappointing to me.
Yeah,
I
was-
fact that
I
they
was
didn't
surprised.
just use Starlink here. I'm sure they had their reasons. I'm sure the lasers have their handovers too, so they would be more frequent cutouts. But the length of that cutout, I just wish they could have been on a really good, clean connection that whole time.
Yeah, even if it is tedious, I get that there's like 2-minute dropouts. We had one of those. If you're doing a spacewalk and it's a 2-minute dropout, fine. But
When
to
the
plan
hatch
it in a
opened.
spot where there's no coverage for 10, 15 minutes, and all of a sudden you cut off half her spacewalk, and by the time you see her again, she's inside. It's like, come on,
Yep.
I wanted to see Sarah's last looks at the Earth and re-entry.
That was a huge thing for me. Like, the hatch actually opening was in a Tidris handover. Like, we didn't have live video of the hatch opening. What the heck? And then when they ended, they were in a blackout zone, like an extended blackout zone. And so the whole thing of opening and closing the hatch, like, neither of those were really visually there for me.
Even if
Make
they
no
had like recorded it locally and sent it
Yep.
back down, so they could have done a replay in the couple minutes that followed, and they said 5 minutes ago, something like that. I feel like that could have really added to it.
Yep. I don't. I do not doubt that most, like all this, or even more stuff, was recorded locally, and we haven't seen it all. And I think that it will eventually come out. So all we're reacting to is like the live event where we got to see it. They didn't have to do that, right? They could have just done it and recorded it and shared it with us later. So glad that they did. But we're just commenting on the live event because I guarantee you they had those. Or I would. I can't guarantee you. I'm not in charge of it. I would be very, very surprised if they weren't recording a bunch of that stuff locally to show us later, and then they're going to keep the hype up by giving it out a little bit over time, right? That's what happens with these things. I wish we could have seen the hatch opening and closing. Like, you could see the big motion of the hatch, and you're like, wow, whoa, that hatch is definitely moving, but then we didn't actually get to see the swing. They're not making a movie for our entertainment. They're doing an actual mission to test things out, so I can't really complain about too much. I just wish we had seen it. The biggest thing that sort of got me, we know that everybody wants to complain about not seeing stars, right? We know that any video in space of an EVA or whatever, people are like, oh, I couldn't see any stars. I can't see any planet. And it was exacerbated by the fact that we had a dark planet behind the camera, right? And maybe this camera exists and I just don't know about it. I am very curious if we will ever see footage that was a camera that was specifically set and exposed to show the astronaut and the star background in some way, shape, or form. Like bad exposure, it's the outline of the astronaut or whatever, right? But just something, knowing that that is the go-to, that like one of the go-tos that all the deniers say that we don't actually go to space or it's filmed in a soundstage, whatever, all that nonsense. I'm so surprised we haven't seen something there that would help shut that stuff down. Of course, they'd still just say it's CGI, right? But just that one shot of here's this thing we recorded, it's the silhouette of the astronaut and the field of stars behind them. I wonder if something like that was set. Maybe it wasn't live, it wasn't capable of doing that live because you get into frame rates and exposure times and stuff, right? To capture that versus actually live stream it. I don't know. Like, I'm really curious, and I don't even mean for it to be super. Like, I see Alan's comment about dynamic range. D, we should ask D this.
Yes.
Would there be a way that we could capture that? Like, does a camera exist that could somehow capture, even if it's the silhouette of the astronaut in front of the stars? Like, we have the technology, right?
Well, they've got lights on the astronaut. And so they've got the control of the lighting there. So, and cameras can have a lot of dynamic range, and you can expand that doing HDR images where it's technically multiple images that are stacked together at different exposure values, because I'm sure the astronaut would be very bright when you're exposing for these stars. But also, I'm not sure if the astronaut isn't lit from the side opposite the hatch at all. Then they would be more silhouette, so perhaps that would be okay to do some exposing with stars if there were another camera out that way, just a couple feet in the vacuum of space.
Yeah. Again, they're not going up there for our entertainment, and this is really important. I don't want anybody to be like, wow, these entitled losers are whining about this. Like, make no mistake, they didn't have to show us anything. I'm glad they showed us stuff, and what we got to see was absolutely amazing. I just want more firepower to grab people by the neck and tell them that we need to go to space, right? Like, I want that firepower. I want those. I want that evidence to show to people. So when I think about these things, I look at it and I'm like, wow, I wish I had this.
Can I jump in really quick?
Oh, Kevin. Yes, of course.
I'm here.
Voice of God.
As a former photographer, I just have to jump in. Like,
yes, please,
and
please.
D, you can confirm this. I've been out of the photography business for a while, but didn't they just need a wider aperture and less light from the foreground?
Yeah, that's what I was saying with they have the lights, they have control of that. I mean, like, they could bring those down, and then if they do a nice long shutter speed and a real wide aperture, actually touching on fast lenses, that's the term for wide aperture lenses. They're fast.
Yep.
There are, I believe, 3 that just went up to the space station that are specifically for low light type applications, which had to drop that in there. It's like we use a variety of lenses shooting launches. We use stuff with a wide aperture. 1.8 is reasonably common. 2.8 is more common. But I have lenses down to f0.95, which just let in so much light. And so the thing is just making sure that the dynamic range between the astronaut, the foreground, and the stars in the background is not too much. But even still, like I said, you are able to expand dynamic range with HDR images. And so even cameras, if it's shooting like 15 stops of dynamic range, you can absolutely stretch that out to like easily beyond 20 with HDR.
I understand the basic concepts of what you're talking about, D. I just know that like with the aperture, the smaller the number gets, the more expensive the lens gets, right? But I think the big thing here is, remember, some of these things, like we know SpaceX uses GoPros sometimes, right? And you have the mass consideration and the space rating and the temperatures and all this sort of stuff. And it was the first mission. I just really, really wish that I had some firepower. Like, there it is, right there. We know the problems. We sent the camera to capture that shot. And here's an astronaut outside of their space capsule with the stars in the background. Come at me, bro. Like, you know what I mean?
Also the orientation, because we saw with Jared's spacewalk, like they're looking down at Earth. So would they then rotate the capsule 180 so that the nose cone is below the astronaut so that we get the stars, or do they do
in the other
90
direction
degrees so that they're just looking at so there's a lot of consideration there, and I'm sure they don't want to be adjusting the spacecraft's attitude during one of those. So it's like, hey, do you want to be looking down at the Earth, or do you want the nose cone in your way? And
there may very well be other cameras that we haven't seen yet. So the camera that we saw
that'd be awesome.
Was on the nose cone, right? And you know the nose cone like opens up like this, and so they had the camera that looking back towards the Skywalker in the hatch specifically for that shot. And the entire capsule was oriented so that the Earth was in the background of the shot, and then the astronaut came up, and the hatch was unfolded this way, and the whole thing was set up like very intentionally done, right? I really do wonder what other cameras we haven't seen yet will eventually get released.
And there was actually a thruster firing in between EV1 and EV2 to reorient the ship. I remember hearing that on comms. I don't know if we played it on stream, but I remember hearing that there was a thruster firing to reorient, and I remember seeing something before the stream about the trunk of Dragon being pointed towards the sun. So it may have had something to do with heat, right? They didn't actually want to be in the sunlight. Sun's hot. Probably in space it's hotter.
Yeah. I think that is a big part of it. We know that they put it in that specific orientation so that the heat shield was pointing back towards the sun, and the orientation was also to help with mitigation of micrometeorite, like let the spacecraft take the hit instead of the spacesuit taking the hit or whatever. There were some considerations there, but I can't imagine. It's not like in Kerbal Space Program where your Kerbal's hanging on the outside and you're like, I just use the RCS, and the RCS is like blowing in the Kerbal's face. Like, it works in KSP. That's not a thing in real life. It doesn't work that way for real.
Yeah, you pointed out different views. There was one point where Jared apparently looked directly into the camera on the
they said it
on the inside of it. Yeah,
they said it.
The timing,
never showed it.
The timing of them showing him like moving, that I want to see all the footage. I want to see everything.
And I think we will. I think we will see the footage. But D, you're exactly right. There was that one moment where they were like, oh, he's going to turn and look at the camera. And they went to helmet cam, and we saw his perspective. But we never, ever, on either EVA, saw the astronauts turn towards the hatch cam and give us a thumbs up, right? I hope that footage exists somewhere and we just didn't see it live. But the astronaut turning around towards the camera and being like, yo. Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. Okay. I also saw people on social media like, "Oh, who filmed it? What's the cameraman?" It's like it was the hatch. Like, come on, seriously, the hatch camera is low hanging fruit there. Um, I did see a comment scroll through the chat. Isn't stacking like editing the image with AI? I don't think that those two things
No.
are anything near the same. D, right?
No, I mean, there are AI enhancements, AI machine learning, however you want to, that people do, particularly Lightroom, which is like one of the big photo editing softwares, implemented in AI noise reduction. But HDR is absolutely not that. There's no sort of generative material there. It basically, with the HDR images, and there are cameras that can do this in the body as well, it's just taking photos at 3 different exposures and
Right.
then merging them. It's like, okay, this is exposed properly in this image, this is exposed properly in this image, this one is exposed properly in this image, and it combines it into one. You're limited
Yeah.
by the dynamic range of your sensor, as I was saying. And so it would be the same as if you just had this incredible sensor that could expose over
All
like
of that.
21 stops.
Yeah.
Because any form of image is processed. I've gone very in depth in sensor
Yep.
types, and so I'm not going to do that here. But the image that you're looking at is not the image it took, because for each subpixel, so like you hear, I'm gonna go too far off the deep end here. Sorry,
For each, you said for each subpixel, and I was like, oh boy.
Yeah, I'm like, I was gonna start to explain debayering, and I was like, okay, this is too much. But you don't have RGB for every little sensor on a camera. You have either red or green or blue. And then it goes through a process called debayering, if it's a Bayer sensor, that's the layout of the colors, or just more generally demosaicing. And so using the brightness values of the nearby subpixels, it creates a RGB value for that. I realized I was going too far off the deep end the moment I started. But yeah, hopefully that's not too complex.
I think you pronounced it wrong. I think it's a Jack Bayer, not a Bayer.
There's a man. I have to debuyer the truck sometimes out there. Like he leaves so much junk in it. I've had a plate in the truck once. Anyways,
sorry, I had to mention it.
That's one of the things. Like any show you watch has processing done to the film. It's not like there's anything that's here is exactly what the camera captured. It's like you shoot it in log, then you apply these filters to it, and it makes it look better. Like all those things are very weak arguments if you want to say that this stuff isn't actually happening. But the key thing here is this was the first time they did it. They weren't going up there to play around or entertain us, right? I'm glad that they shared it, but there's so much there's so many things that there's so much opportunity. Let's put it that way, right? Opportunity for future missions to do things like this. The biggest thing that got me, they came out a lot further than I thought they would. Like we were sort of, I was joking around. I was like, "Oh, geez, is it like are they doing a spacewalk, or is it like a space peep, or are they like space whack-a-mole? Like they're just going to stick their head out and go?" But then when they came out of the capsule and they kept getting further and further out of the capsule, and like just their ankles were in at one point, I was like, "Okay, wow, they are coming out a lot more than I thought they were going to come out of that capsule." So I was surprised by that. But we are being told.
Key point, by the way.
It was
Speaking of being in key.
Thank you. Yes.
You may notice the video playing, and this was something really cool. They announced that there was going to be something to tune in for as a surprise on Flight Day 4 as part of their Starlink demonstration. So, turns out that Sarah Gillis, who you see there, who also did the spacewalk, brought up a space-worthy violin with her up into space and performed a part of Ray's theme as composed by John Williams, and recorded herself playing it, and then they sent that down via Starlink and added accompaniment from all different kinds of students from around the globe who played along for the different parts of it, and those were combined and
Yep.
then released publicly today on X. And in case you didn't know, Sarah is a classically trained violinist uh, from a very young age, and she sounds absolutely fantastic. I wish you could hear it, but YouTube's copyright system.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't play this because this is like a Star Wars theme. We will get struck 8 ways from Sunday if we play the song here on the channel. So please go out and check it out for yourself. They had it on X earlier. They had a video that they put out on X with the whole thing sort of produced together. So unfortunately, we're not going to try to play it here because we don't want to get in a fight with anybody's copyright lawyers, right? But
Yeah.
anyways,
And
that
it's not the first time. Obviously, there was Chris Hadfield who had the guitar on the
Yep.
ISS doing David Bowie. You had one of my personal favorite astronauts because she's a good friend, Katie Coleman,
Yep.
who played flute aboard the ISS alongside Ian Anderson from Jethro Tull and has played with him since returning back to Earth multiple times. So I'm excited. I hope we get to see Sarah playing with some of these students or playing again with John Williams on Earth after she returns too.
Yeah. A huge thing here is the fact that there was a violin in space, right?
Mhm.
Like, we've had instruments taken to the International Space Station. There's a lot less room on a Dragon capsule than there is on the International Space Station, right? But making room in the mission, folks saying, like, oh, yeah, they're not doing this for your entertainment. Well, maybe they're doing it for inspiration purposes, right? But putting in the cargo manifest of the spacecraft where you have limited mass, limited volume, having that in there is so cool. And the more little personal items like that we see in space, the more we're in space, right? Because there's like humans being in space, and then there's humans and all the little bits and bobs and junk and things like that that make us human being there with us, right? We have that to a limited amount on the ISS, I think, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
let's see. Let me grab a couple things from chat real quick. We got some gifted subs. Devin Waldron gifted 10 subs. And we had a comment from Roseanne Devasto. Roseanne saying, I understand your disappointment with the feed. Please, it's not disappointment. We're not disappointed in anything. It's like the right thing to say is, geez, what we would like to see maybe next time. That's why I corrected myself to opportunity. But Roseanne says, this wasn't meant for our entertainment, just their experience, right? I'm so glad that they shared it with us. I think it's important for us to like say what our expectations were and what people sort of think because they shared it with us. So they're sort of inviting us to give our opinions on it and stuff like that. But it isn't like, oh, what a waste of time. They didn't even give the thumbs up to the camera. Like, please, that's not the way that anyone should ever take it. We just all like cool stuff, and there's so much opportunity for cool stuff. Like it's more like brainstorming ideas, right? Polaris Dawn, Sawyer, did we miss anything on this? There's some orbital stuff we didn't talk about.
I mean, the big thing I think to point out is that they should be coming back a couple days from now. So
Yep.
not tonight, but the night after. We should see them hopefully splash down either off the coast of east coast of Florida or west coast of Florida.
They have
So
a couple of
Atlantic
landing
or
zones
Gulf.
marked, right?
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
this is the first Polaris Dawn mission of up to 3, right, D?
Yeah, so there are 2 more missions they have planned in the Polaris program. The next one is expected to be another Dragon flight, but with some new twist that I'll talk a little bit about more in a second. And the third one is crazily, I mean, it feels crazy to say this, expected to be the first crewed flight of Starship. Of course, like, we saw a while back, like Dear Moon was canceled, and we knew that the Polaris program was planning to be the first crewed flight of Starship, and so that's going to be an incredible moment when it finally comes. But we also know there is a second Polaris mission. We've from the beginning had a good idea of the sort of stuff to expect on Polaris Dawn and knowing Starship, but for that second one, it's been a bit of a question mark what unique aspects they could bring. So I mean, what do you guys think they might do on the next Polaris Dragon mission?
They should take up a fake Hubble and go out there and like wrench on it. Like, you want to see him perform a fake repair, like all the way outside, and like, hey, look at me, I'm using a wrench now, or whatever. Scott over in chat, Scott Herod said they should have put a thumbs up in the test plan. Like, okay, vertical mobility, horizontal mobility, thumbs up mobility. Like, how's the thumb doing?
I do like that idea. I mean, if they had brought a tool bag with them and literally had been testing during the EVA, hey, are you able to tighten this bolt? Are you able to adjust this solar panel? That would have been that would have been.
It's cool. Like the little My First tool bench for like toddlers, and it's got like the peg that you hammer into the hole and the little screwdriver and all that sort of stuff, right? But they have that. It's like made by Space Play School or whatever, and they're up there doing all those repair motion testing for the spacesuit.
Honestly, though, that's a great idea to see for the second Polaris mission. Is almost like to bring back a shuttle reference, like they did after STS for STS-114. They just did a proof of concept that if there were to be a damage to any of the tiles underneath the shuttle, that they could come up with a gap filler, put it in, and repair it to make it safer for reentry. Maybe not necessarily full-on Hubble, but to be able to actually go outside, not just have their feet inside, to be able to actually maneuver outwards, maybe put some handles outside Dragon, and then do some test work. Like, hey, if we have our own commercial space station, we're going to need to do occasional repairs outside. So do an actual full-on EVA, not just a stand-up EVA.
Yeah, and then let's talk about that really quickly. The stand-up EVA. So we talked about this on the launch stream, but it was technically an EVA, right? An extravehicular activity by the normal definitions that NASA uses. So it's a stand-up EVA, right, Sawyer? Like the EVA where you're not completely outside, clutching to the outside of the spacecraft, but your body is exiting the hatch, even though your legs aren't exiting the hatch or whatever. So it was still classified as an EVA. I saw Jonathan McDowell, right, the space police or the orbital police on Twitter, putting out an idea that EVA shouldn't stand for extravehicular activity. EVA should stand for, I'm going to say it from memory, exoatmospheric vacuum activity. So the important part isn't that you went out the hatch of your spacecraft, but you were outside of the atmosphere and in vacuum. And then that covers you if you're still inside your spacecraft, but the spacecraft is exposed to vacuum. It's an exoatmospheric vacuum activity instead of an extravehicular activity. I think I got that
I like
right,
standing spacewalk better.
You like standing spacewalk's easier to say.
Yeah, a lot simpler.
Nice. But it was an EVA. They came out further than I expected. It wasn't just like their head sticking out. They were all the way out. And at one point they had the free thing, like one-handed movement, two-handed movement, let go sort of thing. So I haven't seen a lot of people talk about that as much. I've seen a lot of comparison. Wow, Gemini back in the 60s. Look at this. These dudes, steely-eyed missile man, were like floating free from the capsule, right? And it's just a whole different thing. But give them time. This was the first of many opportunities that have been opened up by the fact that this can happen. So give them time. They're going to not only catch up to what we did in the 60s, they're going to go way past it. Like, it's not even a contest.
I would be very interested in if, like, next time they want to have a longer tether, do a simulated satellite repair, that sort of thing. If SpaceX adds on to this suit with some form of propulsion, so they can fly a distance from their craft, get onto a satellite, fix it. That would be really interesting to see, because of course there were talks for a while about fixing Hubble and but
there's probably
MUV2.
There's a design consideration here because of the tethered spacesuits, right? I was reading a really interesting thread earlier about how the spacesuit works and how it can be so slim and lightweight. And most of it's because the backpack is actually the ship, and that's why you have the tether, right? But apparently the way these spacesuits were working is they were like breathing through oxygen. they were putting oxygen into the suit, but letting it out of the suit, not like recircling it, but just blowing fresh oxygen into the suit and then letting it go out into vacuum via a series of valves or whatever, right? So the longer the spacewalk went on, the more oxygen they just vented into space, because if you're rebreathing your atmosphere, like the big spacesuits NASA has, the EMUs, they have to scrub the carbon dioxide out, right? Because you're breathing back into the spacesuit, it has to circulate through. You have to scrub the CO2, make sure there's enough oxygen. Like that whole big 300 something whatever pound kilogram backpack is because you have to have those scrubbing systems. And SpaceX didn't worry about any of that. They just let the astronaut's breath exit the suit, and they just kept pressurizing it with more and more oxygen. But realistically, they had 3 oxygen leaks on the Dragon, and they were all astronauts, right? So it severely limits the amount of time that you can operate a suit like that. So as for going outside and floating around or crawling to the back or doing any longer tests, there may be some limitations on the amount of time you could actually spend doing an EVA with Dragon as is, with this suit sort of set up.
Well, you say as is, but Jared Isaacman, there were changes for I-4. They got the cupola this time. They got the Skywalker. They got the suits. There is. This is his Dragon, right? Like. Who's
He's
saying
like customizing
it? That they won't change that out for the next one. So,
I'll open
continue to
cycle.
hope.
Yeah. I think chat said it. I think it is open cycle, right? Like it's open cycle versus closed cycle. Do you deal with processing your breath, CO2 scrubbers? You heard Apollo 13, blah, blah, blah. Or do you just get rid of your breath and put more fresh oxygen in? It was a really interesting design consideration, but it'll be interesting to see what comes up next. I think we're supposed to move on at some point. I just enjoy talking about this stuff. I hope y'all enjoy talking about it too. What is up next? McGregor. Fire at McGregor right now, y'all. Apparently, there is an active... The booster did an engine test. Spoilers, it's the booster did an engine test. There's a booster out there at McGregor, and we saw it do a fire, like an actual test fire earlier, but it looks like it may have sparked off a bit of a grass fire. Not the first time we've seen it out at McGregor when they do these tests. So not the end of the world, but that is happening live. This camera is at McGregor. It's our McGregor Live property. That sounds like a dumb way to say it. Our 24/7 live stream from McGregor. This is like a normal thing, though, out at McGregor.
Yeah,
that's from earlier. Yeah, that's the test. It's up here if I want to watch it. The black suit is normal. We hear people complaining about the black suit. Sawyer, right?
Oh yeah.
You're gonna say something.
For the people, no, I was just saying you could hear it. That was all. But yeah, the people at McGregor, they've kind of gotten used to it. In fact, the cows have gotten used to it. That's where the moo comes from.
Yep.
They don't care anymore.
Was this full duration? Because we see them test the booster. You'll see a nice shiny new booster end up out at McGregor. They strap it down. They'll do a cryo test where you see it get frosty and then get unfrosty. Then they'll do a static fire and they'll bring it down. Looks like the duration was 77 seconds, which is pretty usual for these. So a little bit of a auxiliary fire still burning out there, but it gets dry. The grass gets caught. It's not anything they don't normally deal with. So
right. But yeah, I mean, in case you don't know, that's where they test all of the different boosters as well as the engines over at McGregor. This was B-1088 making its first test fire out there. And they test Merlins, they test Raptors, and we have 24/7 feeds of it, right, Toss?
We do. You can watch on McGregor Live, like exclamation point MGL in the chat. There's like people that hang out over there. That's the smallest of our 24/7 streams. But if you want like the secret speakeasy back room of rocket nerds watching rocket engine tests all day long, that's what's over on McGregor Live's chat. Speaking of all the engines they test, I don't know what I'm going to say next. The thrust collection. It's totally a setup.
No, not at all.
Yes. It is time for the merch plug. We got to pay the bills. We have to be able to keep hanging out with y'all. Anybody have one of these shirts yet?
Mine is still on its way, but I promise as soon as I get it, I will wear it on
Okay. D, did you get one of these yet?
Oh, no, I did not.
Jeez. What do you mean? Why don't y'all have these shirts?
Blame a fulfillment center in Orlando on mine.
We need to send you some. We need to send you some shirts. Since I was prepared for the stream, I actually have. Which one do I have on? Ah, yes, the RS-25 shirt. Right? Check it out.
Yes.
It's awesome. I wear it to Home Depot looking to make new friends. So if somebody's like, "Hey, is that an RS-25 on your shirt?" I'm like, "Hey, we should hang out." But anyways. We don't need to overdo it, y'all. We've got the Thrust collection. If you like the cool designs, we've got the Raptors, we've got the Merlins. They all have different little slogos, like Merlin slogans, like Merlin is thrust you can trust or whatever. BE4, less pressure, more space. I think that's something about step by step ferociously, very slowly, but things are coming together out at the Cape. It's another way to get something cool and show off with your nerd friends and support the show. So dress like DOS. Nice.
I love that.
The marketing is dressed like DOS. Nice. Okay, I'm just happy to see you, Credence. Also, it's an RS-25. So what do we have coming up next here? I don't even know if we're on a schedule or on the rails or anything like that.
This next topic isn't
Oh,
all that positive, unfortunately.
it's confusing, but take it away, D.
Yeah, so this week, Slingshot Aerospace detected the breakup of a Centaur upper stage for the Atlas V rocket. That's, of course, a really big deal. The second stages that stay in orbit are one thing. Second stages that create a cloud of debris eventually are another. And they do a lot of work to prevent this sort of thing. But the stage was in a highly elliptical orbit and broke up into at least 40 different pieces. We're talking about space junk all the time and debris in outer space. And anytime that this sort of debris cloud happens, it's definitely a bad thing. That's a lot more to track and harder to control. So this Centaur launched back in 2018 for the GOES 17 weather satellite. And that satellite was in geostationary transfer orbit. And ULA does a lot to prevent the second stages from causing issues. They will, after the launch is complete, it's done all its burns, the payload has separated, they will first move the stage into a graveyard orbit. So that's an orbit where it's not going to conflict with satellites. It won't cause issues, and it can basically just stay passively in space without any sort of control or anything like that. And speaking of being passively in space, they do what's called passivating the stage.
Yeah.
So that involves draining the tanks and draining batteries, so it's not under pressure at that point.
Yep.
Now you might be thinking, oh, that's weird, because doesn't the pressure help make it more stable? And yes, when you're dealing with gravity, the pressure helps enforce the stability. But once you're in microgravity, you're not fighting gravity with a payload or anything like that. It's better to not have that pressure internally that could, if like a crack were to develop, for instance, cause it to rupture. So there are a lot of questions about what exactly happened, because ULA did the right thing and passivated this stage. It was in its graveyard orbit, and that's where 6.5 years after it launched, it now broke up.
Yeah. A couple different things there, right? Like, in the first place, they sort of got it out of traffic, right? And that's what they normally do. They pull it over to an unused lane so that it doesn't actively interfere with satellites in useful orbits. That's the graveyard orbit that Dee is sort of like talking about, right? So that's a totally normal thing to push something off to a graveyard orbit. So if something happens, like it did here, it's less likely to affect anything. They've moved it off the freeway, right? It's like on a side road or something, basically. It's curious, though, because has anybody ever, I grew up in South Texas, has anybody ever shot an aluminum can, like a soda can with a BB gun?
Yep.
Has anybody done that? Have you done that, D?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Look, if you shoot an empty soda can, no pressure in it, with a BB gun, the BB just goes through. You don't get 40 pieces of soda can from that. You just get a soda can with a hole in it. So the big question here is, if a Centaur, which is at that point depressurized, passivated, literally just an empty soda can floating through space, right? If a Centaur broke into 30 or 40 pieces, what the heck hit it that caused that to happen? And
Yeah.
D, this isn't the first one that it's happened to, right?
No, it's not. The Centaur had breakups in 2018 and 2019,
Yep.
and it's weird to see that. So it's a question of, okay, what could have what could it have hit? What could have hit it? Um, as far as I'm aware, it's not like we were tracking some piece of debris that it clearly collided with or anything like that.
Yep.
But they
It
go
would,
through a lot to try to prevent this from creating that cloud of debris even while it's up in space.
yeah.
And
I mean, if it was passivated, like if it didn't have any pressure in it, there shouldn't have been any energy aboard that could have broke it apart, right? You need the energy to come from somewhere, and the only kinetic energy you have is the motion of the satellite. And the differential between the kinetic energy, it's all going the same place. It's all connected together. So it's not like the satellite can crash into itself and impart enough energy to make it explode. Um, if you had pressure on board, like you had stored potential energy aboard the spacecraft, then yes, that energy could break it into 40 pieces. Beyond that, and that shouldn't be the case if it was actually passivated. Beyond that, it'd have to get hit by something.
yeah,
And you have something that gets hit. D, like you said, we weren't tracking another big piece of debris that we thought was going to hit it. We can't track all the pieces of debris. It doesn't completely rule it out. But we don't know for a fact that it got hit. So what
yeah.
are the explanations?
I mean, the likely explanation is a piece of debris and or other rock of some sort hit it, and we don't know the specific material, but it had a very high impact rate, and so there was a lot of energy to cause it to break up like that. Like we've seen other stages break up, but it's not. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
Like this isn't something we're used to seeing.
Yeah.
The fact that
Well-
we're talking about ULA and we are referencing 3 total back in 2018 and 19, like they really try to avoid it. Now we have seen upper stages break apart. Last month, the Changzheng 6A upper stage.
That's a different thing, though, right?
That one broke apart after delivering its payload to orbit just last month, but that's like short term versus long term. The Centaur was up there for 6 years.
Yeah. I
It's just
think an
really
interesting
weird.
thing. Go ahead, Sawyer. Go ahead.
I was
We're
gonna say it is
talking.
really weird though that, of all the things in the graveyard orbit to have this happen to, the 3 or 4 most recent now have been the Centaur
Yep.
upper stage. Is it a design issue? I saw a lot of people in chat asking, could it
Yep.
be they didn't fully safe the FTS on that second stage? There's a lot there that it just raises the alarm bells. Once is a coincidence, 3, 4 times now seems like more than that.
Yeah, like 4 isn't a lot, but it's surprising that it's happened that many.
Yeah.
It is
If I had a nickel
interesting.
every time.
Thank you. Like I would look at other things in the same orbits, right? The same similar types of orbits, and say like, okay, if the Centaurs are breaking up, how many Centaurs are there? What's the percentage likelihood that this is going to happen, et cetera, et cetera? And then look at other stages that have been left in similar graveyard orbits and see if we're still getting the same failure rate on those. And it doesn't sound like we are. So is there something specific to the Centaurs, like maybe they're more susceptible to smaller pieces of debris because they have that ultra thin, ultra high performance lightweight tank, the balloon tank sort of stuff, versus a beefier stage that might take that hit but not come apart? I don't know, but it's very weird that 4 Centaurs have done that. How many other stages are there? Should we see the other stages have gone? You know what I mean?
Now, an
Yeah.
interesting point on like the amount of debris is
Yeah.
with this one. As of now, they're looking at quote at least 40 pieces of debris, uh, and that the other upper stage last month from the Chinese rocket uh, left hundreds of pieces of debris in orbit. So I'd be curious if passivating it did have a decrease in debris versus a totally non-passivated stage.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Moldy Space over here is saying comparing similar orbits, we'd expect like 3 DCSS explosions and 2.5 Falcon explosions, but we haven't seen those other vehicles in similar orbits have the same thing. So assume that there's a random distribution of junk that's sort of flying around, and any type of stage in that orbit that gets hit could be broken apart. You would expect that you would see other stages also come apart. So is that evidence that there's something going on with the Centaurs that maybe isn't understood, that's causing them to pop after some amount of time? Or are they just unlucky? I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a really good question. Or
Yeah.
I wish that we could cover it with any sort of a solid answer. It'd be nice to have a conclusion, but I'm sure ULA is keeping their eye on this sort of thing. I believe Tori Bruno had responded to someone about this, but
Yeah.
like they're going to be keeping an eye on it as they're moving more and more to Vulcan. I'm sure they'll continue to.
Nice.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm sure they'll continue to explore ways to improve access to space continually. And an
Yeah.
important part of accessing space is having a way to get there that's not blocked with debris.
Yeah, not having stuff fall apart once it's there. So it's curious. We expect stuff to happen, but it's a little odd that it's just Centaur that we've seen doing this. I don't think the Chinese
Yeah.
rocket counts. I think the Chinese, like, who knows what the heck they do with their rockets, but I wouldn't be surprised if the thing just exploded in a way that wasn't supposed to happen.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, they discard first stages on villages, so I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Like, it's all bets are off when it comes to the Chinese taking care of their stages in orbit or anywhere else, right?
Right.
But
I mean, it's not like they intentionally blew it up, at least. We have seen tests where people have decided to just blow it up and create all this debris.
yep,
And then the worry becomes the chain reaction of that you've got these
Kessler
40
syndrome.
pieces exactly in the graveyard orbit. If one piece hits another, and then you get, yeah, exactly, the whole Kessler syndrome thing.
Yeah, exactly. But we'll keep watching it and see what's going on. Is this just unlucky Centaurs, or is there something going on where even though the batteries are uncharged, they pop after some amount of time? Still seems really unlikely that it would cause 40 pieces of debris. But right now, we'll just keep watching it.
I have a theory.
Do you have a theory? Oh, what's that?
It was listening to too much Taylor Swift, and it heard about all the breakups.
Uh,
I'm going to turn my
Shout out, Trevor.
camera off and leave. Bye.
yeah,
Show-
so you're-
show's
I don't even listen
over.
to Taylor
We can
Swift, but I
go.
had to.
Disconnect from the show. This show's over. Good grief.
Hey,
I'll
it's
hide
good stuff
myself
now,
in shame.
Doc.
Can we groan? Yeah. Hey. All right. So
Thanks.
continuing
Thanks,
on with
Kevin.
D&I. No, mute that person. Anyways, we'll continue watching what's going on with that. It was a swift exit. Nice. I was going to make a comment about, wow, the ULA Sniper is really getting good at this. They're hitting stages out of
Ooh.
orbit now.
Good
But
one.
anyways, yeah, roll the outro. Hey, let me say thanks real quick. A super chat came in from Aravale, and Aravale said, oh, it's a question. It's not much of a question, more of a suggestion. Instead of EVA, how about space person activity cultivating exploration, wonder, and laudable knowledge, which you won't be surprised to learn spells spacewalk.
Ooh, okay.
I have very mixed feelings about that level of acronym.
That's a reach.
Yeah. Yeah, there's
more of a
some
reach
fun
than the
acronyms.
spacewalk was.
Acronyms can be very good. Like I love a good acronym. And the idea of spacewalk as an acronym is intriguing, but it's a bit much. I'm sorry.
It needs to be self-referential, like somewhere in it needs to say spacewalk, so it keeps like getting into an infinite loop as you try to figure out what the acronym means.
My favorite is still the when Stephen Colbert got his space treadmill. The Combined Operational Load-Bearing External Resistance Treadmill, the Colbert. And yes, that was off the top of my head. I did not Google it.
Okay, we need to move along here. I think we're losing people. They're like, seriously, get on with the
Yeah.
program. Zoo K3, right? We're gonna hop on. Hey, we're gonna hop on to the next topic here, which is this Chinese rocket land space.
That's
which
a pretty big
did-
leap of a segue.
You like that?
It wasn't me. That one wasn't me.
Let's hop right in. Zoo K3 did a hop, and it was a 10-kilometer hop with a relight in flight. It actually came back down and land again. If you looked at it, you may think that it looks like other rockets. It seems to be very stainless steely. Is that a methane engine on the bottom? It looks like a methane engine on the bottom. What is this? Those legs even look familiar. Coming over here, doing the 10-kilometer hop, very much in terms of things that we've sort of seen. Little booster-looking stage here. Apparently, this thing is 3 landing legs, so going for the Kerbal Space Program, saving a little bit of mass while still having the tripod effect on. And they have, we've seen a couple tests come out of China where they're testing the methane engines, yada, yada, yada. Everything's sort of ticking along with this. But this seems to be the highest amount of control that they've successfully demonstrated so far. It went all the way up to 10 kilometers, like I said, but they were throttling the engine. They relit the engine. Look at it coming back down on the pad again. They've got apparently enough throttle control to land the thing gently. It says land space. It's right there on the title. You just land your space vehicle right there where it says land space. That's a bit of a reach. Everybody cheering, of course, that it happened. But the question is, how far behind SpaceX does this put them? So how long ago was SpaceX doing these sorts of things with Falcon 9 or with Starship? I think comparing it to one or the other might be an interesting conversation. But this hop, does this mean that soon we'll see Falcon 9 or Starship mini class style rockets flying out of China? What do y'all think? Sawyer, let's ask you first.
I mean, I think this is something that we could kind of expect to continue to see, because if you look at the governmental versions of some of their rockets, I mean, the Long March 9 and 10 that are set to come up look a lot like Falcon 9 and Starship. So it's
Yeah.
only fair that, or excuse me, in Falcon Heavy. So it's only fair that now you've got a private company that's kind of competing along with it and going for the Starship angle. It's very much sounds like the Chinese equivalent of trying to copy exactly what the US space program is doing. I mean, more rockets, more better. But
Yep.
yeah, this reminds me of a combination between Hopper and Grasshopper from the early
Right.
days of Falcon.
Chad is saying this is Starship that they ordered from Temu. If you've been spamming
That's good.
with
That's
those.
clever.
It's like, I want Starship. We have Starship at home. This is what you end up with. D, what do you think? I mean, SpaceX was doing hops like this, actually out at McGregor, a pretty long time ago. Is this like, oh, geez, nipping at the heels of SpaceX, or is they still have a long way to go?
I mean, I'm sure in some ways they're right there, but in others, like SpaceX has so much experience under their belts that they certainly have a long way to go. But a 10-kilometer hop is a huge deal.
Yep.
And so even once they get to an orbital class rocket first stage landing, and beyond that, like, it's gonna take a while for them to ramp it up. We saw how much SpaceX has continued to ramp up, and even still, they have had anomalies this year that they have worked to improve the rocket. So SpaceX is still continually improving the rocket, hundreds of launches later.
Yep.
It's exciting to see more reusability. I love it. Propulsive landing is cool. We're going to see it with New Glenn. It's going to be awesome to see more of that. However,
Yeah.
SpaceX has a massive massive head start here.
Head start. It's operational. I mean, Falcon 9 is not flying a methalox engine or a methane engine, LPG engine, whatever you're supposed to call it these days. But the sort of going along with this, they have a long way to go before they're operationally flying it the same way that Falcon 9 is flying. I do hope they use it responsibly, right?
Yeah.
We hear some, like, if this is what it takes to stop dropping rocket stages on villages, please get the reusability down and land your freaking stages and don't drop them on hillside villages anymore. Like, if that's what it takes, I'm okay with it. Every time I see China doing something in space, I hope that they use it responsibly, and the track record of responsibly doing things is not really there, right?
Yeah. I will
Always
say,
a double-edged sword for me.
In terms of SpaceX with the extended experience, having the internal missions of Starlink is also such a huge benefit that's going to be hard for anyone to come back against. Like they got the cost of Falcon 9 down, and they are paying just like their refurbishment, their fuel costs, that sort of thing for every single Starlink mission. And every one of those is another flight with more flight data, more possibility to absolutely perfect the design of Falcon 9. And so it's going to be hard for people to get caught up with the flight rate, to get caught up with that flight data. But I want to see that happen, and I want to see responsibility in space. Absolutely. That's a key thing, making sure that you are safe with your launches.
Yep. Over in chat, JO space HN, I don't know how to pronounce your name. It looks like John, but it's got a space in it. Says, I honestly think the biggest advantage they got from SpaceX was the revelation that stainless steel actually works for this sort of stuff. Well, really well by mass fraction, even though it's not Starship. Or Starship scale, right? So SpaceX sort of upending things there and not trying to use fancy carbon composites or aluminum or anything, and just slapping together. Honestly fair for the first prototypes they made, a stainless steel rocket, in showing that that is an option for materials, and then other companies sort of picking up on the fact that that is an option that they can use, right? So anyways, it's always a thing. Like, we even get like people in the comments like, well, why do you report on what they do? And it's like, well, we report on what they do, but it's always sort of a double-edged sword. Like, I like to see advancement. I hope that they do it responsibly. And for me, the track record just isn't there, right? So anyways, let's see here. I don't think we really missed that. Oh, it was a subscale vehicle. It is not a big vehicle, right? Or this wasn't the size of the final vehicle supposed to be. It's like a subscale tester. So they'll have to go a little bit further. And of course, I appreciate you. We would get along, John Hansen, pointing out that Atlas was the first stainless steel rocket. It was the Atlas that proved that you could use stainless steel, much thinner stainless steel than anything that Starship uses for a actual rocket stage. So anyways, you always get one of those somewhere.
I also saw something.
I was going to hop in and say that, well, Atlas didn't have to re-enter horizontally, and I guess, well, it did.
Yep.
It's just very different ending to that re-entry.
Total different re-entry. Sawyer, what were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, while you were talking about the Temu version, I did see someone say, instead of calling it hoppy, call it copy.
Copy. Yeah, but then somebody's going to say that it's copper versus copy, and then it's the whole thing.
That one I
Let's
didn't
not
come
get
up with.
this started.
I just want to say, I didn't come up with that one. That was someone in chat, but I saw that. And worth the groan. Worth it.
Nice.
It was good. I can't argue with you there.
Yep. And of course, chat pointing out that it was pressurized because those balloon tanks had to be pressurized, and it was the pressure that helped maintain their structure, yada, yada, yada. Yes, we know. Then we start talking about WD-40, and let's just not go down that path. For now, Land Space has gotten this hop done. It'll be interesting to see what comes up next, especially when they start flying the full-scale version of what they got done in this subscale test. Oh, man, I didn't do the thing because I pronounced it correctly. Every time there's a Chinese name, I'm like, how do we pronounce that? I'm like, is it Zhu Q? Like, how am I supposed to... What's the right way to say it? And of course, we just referenced...
Well, the Chinese company Landspace gave us a glimpse of what that might have looked like earlier this week while testing a prototype for its Zhuke 3 rocket. It's made from stainless steel, has 3 landing legs and 1 engine.
We still hear Alicia. Zuke, she said. Anybody else want to try Sawyer? Go.
I'm okay with Zuke.
I left that. I walked right into that. I
Yes,
just
you did.
left myself open. I played myself. D.
I think
How do
you'll
you pronounce
notice I
it?
made a point not to attempt to say it while I was saying everything. Zuka?
Zuke.
I'm
She
sure
says.
I am butchering it regardless. However,
If you want to listen to somebody who you can trust to pronounce it correctly, it's not us three.
No.
Make sure you go check out This Week in Spaceflight. I think we got it pinned, actually, don't we?
Mhm.
Yeah, we do. The space news, if you look at the pinned comment
NASA
here,
tried
click
to
on that.
Well, the Chinese
The Chinese. Just go watch
Chinese,
This
the
Week in
Chinese.
Spaceflight. Yes. Zuke. Just leave it to Alicia. Let her pronounce it over there. This Week in Spaceflight is out. Click the link to go get caught up on what's happening. What is next? Oh dear.
It's spicy time.
It's Starship time. Oh boy, we have to talk, chat, about Starship and delays and red tape, whether it actually exists or not, and what actually is pushing dates back here, and how SpaceX might be making decisions that are slowing themselves down. I think we've got some friends here for this one, don't we? Don't we have like one more person who's going to participate in this little conversation? I think we do. We're supposed to be joined by Ryan as well. Ryan, we got you on?
Yeah, maybe. I might be here.
We need to turn Ryan up a little bit. We hear Ryan? Check, can y'all hear Ryan okay?
Everyone hear me?
Oh,
Hear you.
boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Oh boy's right.
So Starship, let's focus because we've got two different things to talk about Starship. The headline here is that Starship is now not supposed to fly until late November, much to the sadness of people who like to see Starship fly. In fact, SpaceX put out a statement saying that Starships are meant to fly and all that implies. But let's look on the hardware side first, right? We got the regulatory paperwork side and we got the hardware. Start us off with the hardware. Are the ships actually ready to fly or no?
Well, based off the tweet from SpaceX and the update from SpaceX, they say that the vehicle's ready to fly.
Okay.
It looks like 30's ready to fly because, well, they haven't been working on it much. They're kind of doing a few things here and there. I mean, I think today they were just cleaning the lenses on the cameras.
Yeah.
So, I mean, little things like that. We can't see Booster 12. It's tucked away in Mega Bay 1, so we don't really know the status of that. We know that it has this hot stage ring and that, so the vehicles, I guess, could be ready.
Did you say we know it has the hot stage ring, or we don't know?
We've seen it roll in, and it hasn't come back out again, so it should still be on the booster.
Gotcha. Okay.
And then there's the pad. Well, the OLM looks to be ready. They are painting the deck today, so
the actual mount itself, right?
The OLM itself, along with the orbital tank farm, that should also be ready. As far as I know, there's no other changes they're making to it or anything like that. So all the major things that they need to launch should be ready to launch. So that's hardware. Then comes what they're trying to do on this flight, which is catch it, which requires changes to the tower and to the chopsticks, which are definitely not ready.
Because I was going to call you on that. You said everything needed for launch was ready, but I will be danged if the chopsticks look like they're ready, and the chopsticks are required to lift the rocket onto the pad right now. But I understand the distinction, right? Like, they're doing a ton of work to the chopsticks purportedly for the test. Could they roll a booster out tonight and put it on the launch pad? I don't know. Right?
I don't see why they couldn't put a booster on the launch pad right now. The sticks are working. We saw that last week when they did a full sim catch test with them.
Right.
So I mean, they're working. So I don't see why they wouldn't be able to stack a full stack on and launch right now if they so wanted to, which kind of leads into the fact that they could.
They could launch right now.
Their whole thing of Starships were meant to fly is kind of funny to me because they go, Well, Starships were meant to fly, but the FAA is taking a while to do this license modification, well, they have a license.
They do have
Yeah.
they have a license to fly Starship right now.
Yeah,
They just don't want to use it.
because they don't want to fly the same exact flight profile as Flight 4. They want to catch a booster. And well, they
Right.
can't do that under the current license. So therein lies the supposed issue.
Let's talk about that a little bit, the way that the licensing actually works, right? Because if you don't understand how the licensing works, you can't really have a good opinion about whether the licensing is too onerous or slow or whatever, right? And I think I see that happening a lot. Right now, SpaceX has a license and could launch a Starship. They have already been granted that, right?
That is correct. They can launch a Starship in the current configuration that they have. I mean,
in the current configuration and the current the existing, like, the license defines, here's the ship and the components of the ship and the way that the ship is sort of put together, and the trajectory or the mission or whatever you want to call it, right? Like the two big pieces.
Yeah.
So they have a license that would let them fly a Starship. Like you said, they could launch one right now if they wanted to.
They could in theory launch 2 full stacks. Assuming they could refurb the pad, they could launch 30 and 12 and 31 and 13. In theory, they could launch both of those. Those vehicles are pretty similar. They're still Block 1 ships. They can't launch 33 under this license. That will need a change. There's a lot of significant differences. That is for all intents and purposes, a completely different vehicle in terms of launch license. But if they wanted to just do the same trajectory, like launch to the Indian Ocean and splash down in the Gulf with a booster, they could do that. They absolutely could do that.
Right.
But they don't want to right now. They want to catch.
That gets together. That's the rub. But you said they could launch 2 more. I mean, they have the hardware for it. They have the license for it. The FAA has already gone through all the work to approve Starship flying, and it's within some constraints. It's within a certain trajectory and a certain yada yada. Is this the FAA license?
Yes.
I don't know. I haven't looked at this here. I don't know if we're showing the right one.
That is
but
the
they have
license that they got for Flight 4.
That they got for Flight 4. So if they wanted to, they could fly 2 more times.
Yeah.
And the trick is, they don't want to, because they want to fly differently, and they want to fly substantially differently, such that the license they already have, the paperwork they already did, that already covers them able to fly right now, doesn't cover their substantial changes to the trajectory. And that's where we get into the catch, right?
Yeah, that's where we get into the fact that they want to to sum it up, they want to do something that no one has ever done before with the
Falcon 9. I mean, Falcon 9 flies back to the launch pad, right?
We'll put the caveat. Well, it doesn't fly back to the launch site itself. It flies back to a landing pad away from the launch site, but that's besides the point on that one. The other caveat to that is with the largest rocket in the history of humanity.
Right.
And there's also another component to it. Like Falcon 9 doesn't have a hot stage ring that it chucks away, and that has its own trajectory on its own, which is another component that has to be accounted for. Whatever, as the FAA had stated, they had gotten some new information in August from mid-August from SpaceX. I'm going to guess that was simulations run by SpaceX, as well as testing that they did with maybe launch pad stuff or anything along those lines. And whatever that was, all of a sudden the FAA went,
well, that's different than you told us.
We're going to need to take a longer look at this. I don't know what that is. It's supposedly as far as we can tell, it's environmental related. So yeah, that's the big holdup for Flight 5 right now.
So I mean, put it together, because it gets complicated, right? But SpaceX could fly now if they wanted to. They have a ship and booster ready. They could fly in a week if that's what they wanted to do, and they could get very important data, because SpaceX loves to tell you how they need to fly Starships to get very important data, and they could do that, right? But here you go. Here is the actual details on the profile, if that's what it is. People are bringing up things that we haven't actually looked at here. So from where they're going to where they're going for the mission profile, right? What are we looking at here?
So this basically outlines what they can do with this license. So for using a Ship 29 Booster 11 vehicle configuration, which is basically what Ship 30 and 31 plus Booster 12 and 13 are, and you could probably even include Booster 14 and 15 in there, because as far as I know, there aren't any major changes with those boosters. They're still basically Block 1 boosters. But then you get into, well, you're launching from Boca Chica, so I mean, there's where you're launching.
That's not going to change.
Yeah. And then going to the Indian Ocean and the Gulf of Mexico, it does not say
the Starship
return. Yeah, the Starship going to the Indian Ocean, and the booster to the Gulf of Mexico. It does not say return to launch site or return to Boca Chica launch complex. It does not say that. And then
for the mission profile, the same sort of thing, right?
Yes.
Not being caught by the chopsticks, but splashing down in the Gulf, right?
Yeah.
Now, I've seen some people complain about, oh, well, it says they have to use Ship 29 and Booster 11, right? It says there, Ship 29 Booster 11, would that be a huge change for SpaceX to come back and say, hey, we want the same license, but it's going to be Ship 30 Booster 12?
It should be fine with Ship 30 Booster 12.
You mean as written, like they wouldn't need the FAA to modify the license to say Ship 29 Booster? And this might be an opinion because the FAA would be the ones to answer this question, right? But it seems like a bit of a straw man. Oh, well, it only says this. Well, that's not the same.
A Ship 29 Booster 11 type configure, basically they're saying vehicles that are related or similar to that is, I mean, I guess is the way you could read that.
I think you could read it that way, but I don't think, I think you could read it as, it says configuration. Does that mean that Ship 29 Booster 11 have to be used in the configuration, or is it a configuration like that without big changes? Any way you slice it, swapping to different serial numbers is way different of a change than I'm going to catch it this time and it's going to fly a skyscraper back towards civilization, right?
Yeah. There's a significant difference when it comes to that, and a lot of, and talking about the environmental side of the whole thing. A lot of people will think, oh, well, they covered that in the programmable environmental assessment or things along those lines. Well, yes, but also no. So, the original PEA, all the original environmental work that's been done on this is old. Boosters changed a lot since then. I mean, I think the original PEA was it was kind of like the Booster 4 or whatnot. I'm trying to remember which, because I know the 2019 EIS for 39A was the 37 engine one. I am trying to remember exactly what the PEA one said, but one way or the other, the booster has changed a lot. They've got 33 Raptor 2s on there now. The booster is a different design. They're doing hot staging. It's a different vehicle than what's stated in that environmental, and now they need to adjust for that. And to adjust for that, you got to do more studies.
And I think that's a big thing. Like, the environmental assessment didn't include a hot stage ring flying at some unknown location, right? I say unknown. I mean, SpaceX hasn't told us exactly where the hot stage ring is supposed to end up. Apparently, they've told the FAA, but I don't think they've released it publicly. That wasn't covered, even if there were some mentions of, oh, it'll fly back to the launch pad one day. Now there's this third random part that was splashing down in the Gulf, and everybody was okay with that, but it's no longer splashing down in the same manner that it was splashing down originally, right?
As far as I remember, I think that hot stage ring is starting to splash down. It was starting or getting closer to land than they thought it would. Because you have to remember, I mean, this is a 9-meter wide, 6-foot tall, 10-ton piece of steel. Puck of steel is what this thing is. It has its own lift because it's got a decent amount of surface area on it. So you have to figure out where it's going to come down. And if that comes down at a location you don't want it to, well, that's because you can't control where that goes.
Yeah. It's a different impact as well. I've seen, like, everybody likes the simple explanation because it's easy as a punching bag, but I see people like, oh, it's so stupid. The hot stage ring is just going to splash down in a different place in the Gulf, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm on your side with that if it's splashing down 30 miles off the Gulf and it's going to splash down 40 or 50 miles off the Gulf and it's going further out, right? That's like one thing. But if the difference is, oh, it was splashing 30 miles off, but now it's going to splash 4 miles off, that's a whole different thing for me. And it's silly. I've seen too many people do it to minimize it by saying, oh, they're just scared that it's going to hit a fish. Like, you're ignoring the actual problem here. The problem isn't that it's going to hit a fish. The problem is it's coming back to a different location than was previously studied. Where the heck is this thing going to land? And did SpaceX give them some information that says, yeah, that thing's going to be like a mile off the shore now? And then you have to study the aerodynamics of it, and it generates its own lift. And like, how far is the expected ellipsoid for it? Because it's all these different things. It's not just, oh, wow, it's so dumb. What a waste of time. The fact that it's coming back closer to shore is a whole different ball game, in my opinion. Chat, what do y'all think?
There's also a component to the booster as well.
Yep.
From everything I've seen, and this is animations and everything else, and based off even the landing footage from Booster 11, this booster is going to be like, there really isn't any abort mode to this. There really
what do you mean
isn't.
by abort mode?
Like getting out back over the Gulf when you ignite those engines. There almost isn't one. If they have an issue with that landing burn in any way, shape, or form, and they can't control it, it could pile drive into the beach or the wetlands surrounding that area.
Right.
And I'm wondering if when they looked at the data for Booster 11, they went, oh, this is going to be a lot closer. If we have an issue with this, what's going to happen here? Then the FAA is like, yeah, we're going to need to look into the possible issues that might go along with this, or things along those lines. And I think it's the FAA doing their due diligence. Is what they're supposed to do. I know
people don't like to hear that, though.
I know people bash the FAA. I've worked with them. I mean, I've said it before. I'm an aircraft mechanic. I've worked with the FAA. I've talked with them. They're only there to make sure things are done right. They're there to make sure things are safe, that people are following the correct regulations. And that's environmentally as well, because while there is a safety factor to things, safety is also part of environmental. You want to make sure it's all done right. And
I mean, I don't want to give the FAA a pass yet, though, because there's more that we need to unpack as to whether it's realistic here, right? So let's keep talking about the specific changes, because you really got to understand how different what SpaceX wants to do with this flight is from the license they already have and could fly tomorrow if that's what they wanted to do, right? So we talked about the hot staging ring. Where is that thing coming down? And there in mid-August, did SpaceX give the FAA some information that was so drastically different about the hot stage ring? I don't know, that caused them to pause, right? The booster coming back. You were talking a little bit about the abort mode of the booster. We know, like on Falcon 9, because I filmed this myself, where if something goes wrong with the booster RTLSing, it's initially sort of targeting offshore, and then the final burn makes it target the LZ, and it ends up doing that last little tweak, right? So I would assume that Starship does the same sort of thing, where it's targeting some other position, and then when it gets down to start that final trajectory, it makes the decision, everything's running nominally, I haven't exploded, I think that I can hit the landing, so I'm going to go for it. And it changes its trajectory over. But what the heck happens if it doesn't get caught, right? Like, does it fly into the wetlands? Does it just come down? Does it just turn off the engines and fall if the catch doesn't happen? Like, is it just all automated? Like, I don't even know, but that is so drastically different than anything that they've done before, even with a Falcon 9, because they don't catch Falcon 9s, right?
Be kind of interesting if they tried to catch one of those. I mean,
it'd be interesting if they tried.
Catch it by the Griffins? I don't know.
I don't know.
But
so
yeah,
go ahead.
Well, there's a lot of different scenarios to consider. What happens when you're trying to catch something rather than landing it on four landing legs? You're landing it on two pins that go inside a rail.
Right.
And they are landing it on a landing pad. I mean, we call it catching, but they're landing it on a landing pad. It's just the landing pad's not there when the booster initially flies through the arms. The landing pad literally moves into position, and then the pins go down on the landing pad, or pads, I guess, if you want to look at it that way.
It's a stretch for me, but yeah, okay, I get what you're saying.
I mean,
yeah.
it's kind of nuts what they're trying to do, and with it taking longer, it can take longer. And I mean, as to that SpaceX, the FAA.
We have more stuff to unpack before we make any decisions. We still have more things to talk about. So let's keep on with the other things because we haven't gotten to sonic booms yet.
Oh yeah,
right?
there's so many elements to this. I mean, and that's
let's keep naming them.
Yeah. Well, let's see here. They're trying to catch a booster. That's the whole number one thing. The catch is the catch. As like Alex said,
and the hot stage ring is ending up somewhere else as part of the fact that it's coming back to get caught.
The hot stage ring is part of it. The sonic booms are part of it. I mean,
they're part
considering
of it.
the size of this thing. What the alternatives to landing on the sticks, like what alternative modes is going to happen? Like, is it going to fall? Is it going to blow up? What is it going to do? What are the failure modes? What are the abort modes you can do to make sure it doesn't actually hurt anyone or anything, or make sure it avoids stuff that it has to?
Which isn't anything you worry about when it's just splashing down in the Gulf. It's okay, it's splashing down, but it's not coming back to the launch pad. It's not coming anywhere near civilization there. So, this is the keep out zones. It's all good. Well, it's different when you're coming back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we got the fact that the catch is happening, which exacerbates and I'm going to say it's happening because I think SpaceX is going to do it, right? We want them to do it. That exacerbates where the hot stage ring ends up. That exacerbates what happens if the catch doesn't go well, and how does that affect the environment around the launch pad and the wetlands, and et cetera, et cetera. The sonic booms. See, I don't think that sonic booms are really like voodoo witch science or anything like that. I would be more concerned about the public being aware of the sonic booms and somebody not having a heart attack because they think we're under attack or something like that. But the actual impact to the sonic booms, you got to study them, but I just don't know how much the sonic booms would really push things back, right? But
yeah, I don't think they would.
What else is there? There's another pillar leg, whatever the heck they have to figure out.
I mean, there's also the thing of, they have to figure out how they even do it with the launch pad itself. I mean, all this testing points to that. Is SpaceX went into this not knowing even how they were going to do it. All the modifications to the pad goes to show that they didn't. I don't know. This is not really calling them out or anything. It's because no one's ever tried it before, but they didn't really know how they were going to do this with the current pad that they have. So they were trying to figure that out as well. And they're learning along with the FAA is learning how this is going to happen.
Can you imagine being in the FAA's position and it's like, your job is to keep the public safe, and somebody comes to you and they're like, we want to land a skyscraper near civilization. Like, what are you freaking crazy? But yet it happens. Like, Falcon 9s come back and that all got sorted out, right? But the fact that Starship is so much huger than the Falcon 9s, and I think the public is closer. Is it the public is closer to the Starship landing pad at Isla Blanca than they are to LZ-1? I'm asking that question out loud. But you talk, and I'm going to go look it up. I just thought about it, and I'm going to go look at Google
they
Maps.
are.
I think they're closer. Thanks, D.
The closest public location would be basically right by the port, Jetty Park and whatnot, and that.
The pier at Jetty. You know something? They're about the same, honestly. So LZ-1 at the Cape. I'm sorry, I'm not showing y'all, but LZ-1 at the Cape. Line of sight, like straight line down to the pier at Isla Blanca. You have to go or the pier at Jetty Park. You have to go all the way out on the end. Is 5.99 miles, which is just about the same as you get with Isla Blanca Park and the launch pad at Starbase. So they're about that distance is about the same, right?
Yeah. But
okay,
it's a much bigger vehicle, like way bigger vehicle.
So maybe that's a fair point. It's a bigger vehicle, but the public safety zone is similar, I guess. I'd have to go in and look at the exclusion zones and stuff. I don't know how much that is. But there is something that the FAA said In their statement, didn't the FAA say that it wasn't a safety issue, it was an environmental issue? Like, they're not worried about the hot stage ring hitting somebody on the head at Isla Park, right? It was more the environmental review of that. Am I remembering that correctly, or is that just how I want to remember it?
They were saying there's pull up the thing again here, because there's so many different elements to this here. Trying to pull it up, basically saying, the SpaceX current launch license authorizing Starship. They're talking about the launch license on that, but they basically covered. It's a more in-depth review is what the information is triggering. SpaceX submitted new information in mid-August detailing how the environmental impact of Flight 5 will cover a larger area than previously reviewed.
So, wait a second. In the middle of August, SpaceX said that the environmental impact would cover an area wider than they previously thought?
I guess, yeah.
That's what it says.
That's what it says. So, my question then to SpaceX, and this is a legitimate question to SpaceX, and it has to do with that update that they put out. You're talking and asking about the environmental side of things, and why things are taking extra time than you might have thought of. Well, it's you yourself that submitted the fact that it's a bigger area than you thought, which then triggers the FAA. They need to look into it.
You know what I want to know? In August, we heard from the FAA that mid to late September was like on the table.
Hey guys,
right?
Sorry to hop in here real quick. If we can get Cape Cams, there is a second stage with a meatball and a worm right behind me.
There's a second stage going behind you? Oh, it is.
I'm very sorry to cut in there.
Dee's going to take a picture of it.
Yeah, the worm and the meatball on second stage.
You can see it.
Maybe?
I would believe so. That would be my guess.
I don't think we have that camera.
Mission.
We don't have that camera piped into the show. D, can you point your camera at it? Like, can you point your webcam down a little bit or something?
That's a whole separate
There
track,
it is.
I really can't.
We got it. We got it.
Is that going the wrong way?
Wow.
Beautiful.
Well, somebody zoom in on it.
Exciting to see the exposed engines and stuff, too.
Yeah, normally that's covered with a black tarp.
Is going on
it's a
there?
Very clear tarp, seemingly. It looks like a lightweight plastic.
Huh.
This is new.
That's odd.
I heard something behind me moving, and turn around and I see the meatball and the worm.
That should be going to Pad 40 eventually. Right now it's going towards Hangar X, but
yeah,
it will be the first crew launch from Pad 40.
They got a little bit of a traffic jam. They got a tanker there too behind them. Huh. Well, there you go.
That was cool.
Yeah.
You never know. You never know what's going to happen here when you're watching, I guess, the Flame Trench with our live cameras everywhere. Huh. All right. Well, it's gone around the building there, so we can't see it anymore. We were talking about the environmental impact. Oh, what I want to know is, did the FAA say September was on the table? And then, wow, that was a lot of, hey, how's it going? That was a lot of VMix on the screen all of a sudden. Did the FAA say September was on the table, and then SpaceX came back and said, yo, it's going to be a lot wider area of impact for the environment than we previously told you? Or did they give that to the FAA, and then the FAA said September was still on the table? It seems really unlikely to me that they would give this information that the area of environmental impact was way bigger than SpaceX calculated, which pump the brakes. Wait a second, what else did you calculate wrong, right? It happens, but that's why they're developing this.
Mm-hmm.
And then the FAA says, yeah, okay, we said late September, but with this new information you literally just gave us in the middle of August, we need a little bit more time. And that's where the 60 days comes in, and everybody gets out their pitchforks and screams that the FAA is slowing things down, right?
That is an interesting question.
Jeez.
I'm kind of curious in which order it happened in.
Yep.
I would guess the FAA said mid-September, and then after some more, looking at data, running simulations, SpaceX went, well, here's the additional data. Here's the additional data from testing or simulations for the modification for the launch license, and then the FAA went, whoa, well, now we need to involve someone else. So I think what ended up happening before is things came back relatively fine, and they were going to be able to get that modification. But whatever new environmental data or range came out, all of a sudden, the FAA now has to involve other agencies or has to take even a longer look at it. I don't know what that is, to be honest. I'm trying to think of what that could be that all of a sudden adds 2 months to this process.
I mean, only 2 months to the process. Like, if you ask me, 2 months is like the fast track. If SpaceX comes back in the middle of August
That's fast.
and says, oh, the area is larger than we expected, and then that triggers all these other reviews, and it's only 2 months, because that seems like the fast track to me. I know people are not going to want to hear that, but that doesn't seem very big. I want to look at this real quick. John Hansen says, did not say way bigger, only larger, and that only applies a couple of, what does that mean? Like, if SpaceX says that it was larger than before, I would love to see the detail. Like, it's clearly in SpaceX's power to release that.
Mm-hmm.
They could say, oh yeah, we originally said it was going to be this, and now we say it's going to be this, and that's only 5% bigger.
Yeah.
Right? And if that was the case, I'd be like, really? It's only 5% bigger? But if they come back and they're like, yeah, it's 3 times as big, I'd be like, wow, okay, that's a huge difference. SpaceX could tell us that. They don't have to.
No,
they could.
And same thing with the FAA. If neither one of these parties are under any obligation to let anybody know what the actual holdup is, they don't have to tell us. As much as we would love to know all the little details, they're not going to tell us.
I think they should have to tell us, though.
It'd be nice.
Like, I think they should. I think that so much stuff hides under the guise of intellectual property, right? Like, your calculation for the environmental impact of your rocket should not be proprietary information. It should be open to the public. And if they give it to the FAA and we go to the FAA and say, hey, the public wants to see this, we should be able to see it. And then we should be able to make our own decision. And if it's 5% bigger, dang right, it shouldn't take more time to work it. I still think 60 days is a fast track. But if they said, oh, it's 5% bigger and it's 180 days to review it, jump off a cliff. That's ridiculous, right? But this whole hiding the information, not giving us the information, we've asked the FAA for it. The FAA can't give it to us. It's SpaceX proprietary information. How in God's green earth is the environmental impact area of the system that they're launching proprietary? I don't get it. I don't understand that.
Because with the new license, they will release an environmental addendum, basically, to the PEA. So you'll be able to take the original PEA and say, okay, for an RTLS booster, here's the impact. Now, with the addendum, here's the new impact. We'll be able to see it, just
not right now.
Not right now. It'll be when they release it.
Let me grab this from chat. Alan Reichner asked, didn't they write a whole blog post? Remember, they is SpaceX here. Didn't they write a whole blog post telling us what they think the holdup is? I'm confused why you're saying SpaceX didn't tell us their thoughts. I'm not asking for SpaceX thoughts. SpaceX has given us their thoughts. I want to see the evidence that backs up the reasoning behind that. SpaceX gave us a bunch of opinion. Did anybody see that congressional hearing? Right? The congressional hearing where the Congress people were grandstanding and making blustering statements. Oh, slowing down the space industry. I want to see the evidence that backs that up. I don't want bluster. I don't want sound bites. Like, I want to review the evidence. Like, show me that this zone is 5% bigger. Show me that the hot staging ring is landing 2 miles offshore instead of 30 miles offshore. Like, I don't want what somebody tells me their opinion is. I want to look at some of the facts and draw my own conclusion about it, right? And if it's how the injector on a Raptor engine works, that's one thing. That's very proprietary, right? But environmental impact, safety impact, those sorts of things, you want me on your side, like, give me the facts and let me look at it and be like, dang, y'all are right. Don't just tell me that you think that it's not fast enough. I think it's actually really fast. 60-day turnaround for a larger environmental impact than you originally said. But that's not the whole point here, right? Let's circle back around, because I've seen more than one person say, well, this has been the plan all along. Like, SpaceX has always been planning on catching these boosters, right? We knew this was the case. Well, okay, but I don't think that the FAA accepts license modifications posted on social media. Just because SpaceX hinted that they were going for the catch, or posted that they were going for, or Elon mentions that they're going to go for the catch, that's not the proper process to notify the FAA and give them the information that, hey, we're going to need, this license is going to be way different, right? And here's how it's going to be different. Like, there's an official process to do that, and it's not posting on X, and it's not even posting on your own website. Like, you got to get the data together and give it in a timely manner. Mid-August ain't it.
There's a process for submitting license modifications.
You don't say.
Yeah. It's all.
Is it
it's all
tweeting
laid
at
out.
FAA News on social media? Like,
yes,
at FAA
this is
News.
Exactly what it
By
is.
the
Doc.
way,
it's all laid out in a lovely thing called the Federal Aviation Regulations under Part 4. What is it? Title 14, Chapter 3, Subchapter A, Part 400, basis and scope, and the licensing is under Part 450. That's where it is. That's where it lays out what you need to do. SpaceX knows this. They know exactly
there's
what they
a process.
need to do.
You can't act like SpaceX doesn't have a lot of licenses from the FAA, record number of Falcon 9 launches, record number, like all these records, right? And then for somebody to come back and say how the red tape is holding back space industry, and we get the first commercial spacewalk, and we get a record number of launches, and we've got vehicles that are being reused, and like all of these things, like they love to tout the graphs all going through the roof, and then on the other hand, tell us how they're being slowed down. Like,
it's like, I don't think anyone really realizes how slow the old process was.
The old process,
where it was multiple different agencies, multiple different. It was a much slower process. Like, if SpaceX tried to fly Starship under the old process, you might be waiting a year between license modifications. Who even knows?
Yeah.
Like, the FAA worked with multiple launch companies to come up with the new licensing system, which is under Part 400, what I was just talking about before. They worked to come up with this whole system to where they can do this kind of licensing thing. And as the FAA spokesperson said during that hearing, SpaceX chose this particular licensing setup.
That's a whole other thing that people don't understand.
They chose to do flight-by-flight licenses, not an all-encompassing. All-encompassing, they would probably still be in the licensing process if they tried to do that.
Maybe.
Who even knows?
Maybe not.
How long that would even take, or what even...
Yeah.
Like, to try to come up with an all-encompassing license for a vehicle that's constantly changing, I don't even know if that's even possible. But SpaceX chose to do the flight-by-flight license to make it quicker, make it easier. And I gotta say, the FAA has been pretty quick, considering the changes that they've been making to these vehicles, the changes they've been making to the pad, the changes that they've been making to the flight profile. I mean, just remember, between Flight 2 and 3, they changed their landing zone. They went from the Pacific to the Indian Ocean. That was a pretty quick change, and that didn't take that long to figure out. Like,
that is a whole thing. Like, the two different licenses, not a lot of people understand this, right? But the FAA has offered two different ways that you can get a license. One is like the long but very flexible once it's done way, and one is the shortcut, fast track, quick way to do it, but it's not very flexible. And SpaceX chose the fast track way that's not very flexible instead of the longer way that would have given them the flexibility to fly Starship the way they need to fly it to get the data that they say they need, right? And by the way, I say they say they need. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't believe SpaceX, and also I want to see Starships fly. But that is me saying SpaceX has admitted that. Like, SpaceX has told us that they need to fly Starships, and they have the opportunity to fly Starships. They just didn't opt for the paperwork that would let them fly the way they want to fly. They wanted to sort of have their cake and eat it too. It's more complicated than that, right? But where else do we have to... Chat, how are we how are we looking with this? Like, SpaceX could fly now if they wanted to under the existing license. It's the catch that's sort of slowing things down. Apparently, SpaceX got new information in the middle of August. By the way, what was happening in the middle of August? The slap tests, where they were slapping the booster, and then we saw all of these changes start to happen. And is it causation or correlation? I don't know there, right? But did they find something in the slap tests? I don't see how that would increase the environmental impact. But it sort of lined up a little bit there, right? Clearly, SpaceX was doing a big round of what will happen if we actually catch this thing, and they provide more information back to the FAA. And the FAA, in my opinion, turns it around really quickly by saying that, hey, well, it's 60 days. Like, if they had come back and said 180 days or a year or something like that, I'd have my pitchfork out. But 60 days for a larger environmental impact than they previously submitted. If you want me to change my tune on that, I've got to review like the data. Like, show me the hot stage ring is a mile away from where it was going to be before. And I'm like, dude, that is not a big difference. Come on, seriously? Show me that the sonic booms are 5% wider area than previously calculated. I'd be like, are you freaking kidding me? 5% different? But if it comes back and it's 200% different or something like that, that's a whole other ball of wax. And 60 days doesn't seem like a long time to me. Nobody wants to hear this, though.
We'll find out once the whole addendum comes out. That comes with the license. Whenever that happens, that could be 60 days from now. It could be a couple months. Who knows? In their studies, they might find something else, and then that adds. I mean, I was hoping for 4 flights this year, but it looks like we're only getting 3. And if the unfortunate happens, we only may be getting 2. Which, I mean, that opens a whole nother thing to the Starship program of feels like they're getting a little bit behind on getting data for flying for Artemis contract and everything along those lines. But that's a whole other can of worms and a whole other thing along on its own. But I think what SpaceX could do now is, well, you want to modify this license so you can catch. Okay, so keep working on the sticks.
Time out. Didn't they also know that, like, right after the previous flight?
That they wanted to catch?
That they wanted to catch in Flight 5? Like, certainly they didn't wait till the middle of August to try and do that. They said beforehand that they wanted to catch that. They just didn't have all the calculations done or something. I wish they would just release the data so we could look at it.
The real question is when was the initial modification for the license submitted? When was that initially submitted? Exactly when?
That's frustrating to me. If I have a beef with the FAA, like, I think the FAA should be able to release that information. Like, if we ask, when did SpaceX submit this license? When did they submit the modification? When did they submit more information for the modification? There's nothing proprietary about the timeline that they're submitting this stuff, in my opinion. I don't know if Chad agrees with that, but it seems reasonable to me.
They should. But I was thinking, because, all right, well, while you figure this out, while you figure out how to catch your booster, and while you figure out the environmental issues you need for the license modification, just fly 30 and 12. You have a new heat shield on 30 to test, which is now on Block 2 of ship. Go test it.
There were significant problems with the heat shield as well. Like, there were big things to fix with the heat shield and rapid cadence to fix things. Why don't you fixing that right now? Go fly it and get the data on it.
Just go test it. And, see if you can get another pinpoint landing out of 12. Heck, see if you can get a pinpoint landing with 30 with the new heat shield.
Get me better footage from the buoy of it landing. Like, get more sonic boom data in different environmental conditions, It's like,
they can learn so much if they just fly.
Yeah.
And then try it and then say your license modification comes through, try it with 31 and 13 then. I mean, I don't understand why they don't just fly. You say starships are meant to fly. Well, fly then.
And you could be flying.
You can fly.
Yes, sure.
There's nothing stopping you from flying your Starship right now. Literally nothing.
Yeah.
That's what I don't get.
It really is the thing. I mean, the thing that sort of gets me and makes me try to balance the way I think about this is they talk about how they need the rapid cadence, But when you look at it, they are empowered to fly the rapid cadence right now and get more data. And I know it's not every single thing they want, but they could roll something out and they could fly it and they could get more data about problems they identified and changed for the next thing. But every time they sort of do one thing, declare success, and move to the next big thing, right? And that speeds you up, but it's not like verifying that you actually solved that problem and learned from it or whatever. I get that if you want data on the catch, you have to come back and catch it. But I also accept that it's more complicated to catch it, especially if you didn't even figure out it was going to be different than you thought until mid-October or mid-August. And so it takes a little bit of time, but it's in your power to continue flying starships in the meantime, getting good data about their operation and proving, yeah, our models work. Like, that's what we said it was going to do, and that's what it did. So next time we give you a model, you have more faith in us, or whatever, you know?
You know, I'm looking at chat myself, and I'm seeing
The money?
people mention money. Like, okay,
Yeah.
come on. Yeah, they built SN16, scrapped it. They built parts of SN17, scrapped it. They built S27, scrapped it. They built 21, scrapped it. Like, no.
It's not the money.
They scrapped Booster 5 and Booster 8 without doing anything to either one of them.
Yeah.
No. Money is not even remotely
They scrap things we don't want them to scrap.
Like,
there are so many things like that, right? But I am 100% open to changing my tune. I don't feel like 2 months is a significant delay. I feel like they could continue to get good information in the meantime, and it's like right there. They could just grab that gem and go with it, right? But if information comes out, and neither side's given this to us yet, that, oh yeah, the hot staging ring was just 1 mile different, and that triggered a re-environmental review, like, my pitchfork is sharpened and ready, right? Or the sonic boom was 5% more and it's not that big of a deal. Like, I'm willing to change my opinion. The problem, or I'm willing to change the way I think about it. The problem is that we just don't have that data right now, right? So I'm not okay just giving the full path. Oh, wow, red tape is slowing down our innovation, because we do way too much cool stuff to really lend credence to that until you put the evidence on the table that that's actually what happens. And it can't be the company just doesn't want to fill out the paperwork, or the paperwork gets submitted and then it sits for 8 months or something. That would be ridiculous. But I just don't see the evidence of that happening. Like, right now, it feels like the teenager in high school is complaining that the professor's not grading their work fast enough, but they were already 2 months late turning in their work. It's like, yeah, you can't graduate because you didn't do the test. You needed to do that 2 months ago, and then we'd be flying right now.
It does. When I initially read this update, I read through it and went, I don't. It feels like SpaceX is just kind of complaining. I'm sorry, but it feels like they're.
I don't know. They're passionate though. Like, SpaceX is passionate about getting stuff done, right? Which is why we love them. So take the passion and like temper it.
Yeah.
It's complaining, but I gotta see the evidence. I gotta see, like, are you really being held back?
But the sources. The one thing I can't stand is, and this kind of, and we did talk about that, the CNBC story that that whole thing.
That's a whole other bunch of nonsense.
There's a whole other bunch of stuff, but the one thing SpaceX hasn't been doing is put sources in. Where's your data?
Yeah.
Where is it? Like, I would be more inclined to back you up and believe you if you showed the data, the sources.
It's a passionate argument right now, right? The argument is not based on facts or data that we've been giving. It's been based on passion. We want to go to Mars. We want to fly rockets. We want to push things forward. We don't want to be left behind, right? All those are very passionate things, but there's never any data in the statements. It's never like, we submitted it on this date and then we didn't hear back from the FAA for 3 weeks. Like, tell me that. Freaking bring the receipts and show me what changes were made. If you can't bring that, it makes me think that maybe the facts don't back up your position, right? I don't know. Like, I really want to see.
There's so many open questions still. Like, there's just a ton of open questions, and I really don't know the answers to a lot of them. A lot will get answered when the license comes out and the environmental part of it comes out. A lot of those answers will a lot of those questions will be answered. But until then, I mean, unless we hear something more, which I hope we
Yeah.
do. I want to, but knowing the FAA,
Well,
I don't
this
know.
this from chat. This from chat, real quick. Did y'all see the statistic about how much of the FAA's resources are consumed by which provider? Right.
Oh, so yeah.
80% of the FAA's resources are consumed by a single provider, and it will not surprise you who that is. All of the flights that happen with the record cadence and the vehicles doing things that have never been done before, it was like 80% of the FAA or the FAA's resources are consumed by SpaceX.
And then
And it's like, good grief, that's a lot. But I want to see these things fly. I'm here for it, but I like to think that I have a scientific mind or an engineering mind. I want to like look at the facts. And if SpaceX comes back with the receipts and say like, hey, we submitted on this date and then they sat on it and they didn't hear back, that's a thing. Just show me that and I'll be like, yeah, that's freaking ridiculous. But a nebulous claim that paperwork is too much without showing me why the paperwork is too much.
yeah, where is it?
We have more to talk about though. Permitting.
There's just so much with that update. It's kind of nuts. Yeah, and the
Permitting.
Yeah, you want to start on that one?
There's a reason. So there's actually a reason. I love SpaceX to pieces, right? Like I love seeing rockets fly. Like that's the whole thing. But the whole permitting thing that happened with the deluge in the EPA in the TCEQ, I self-served some information there, right? I looked at that and I was like, geez, I really want to get to the bottom of what the heck is going on here. Like, the TCEQ is fining SpaceX, but SpaceX says that they had a permit and it's all a misunderstanding. And like, what's the actual evidence here? So I have spent a ton of time doing information requests, like public information requests to the Texas government, getting documents and looking through documents and trying to see if what I could find in the documents around the permitting of the deluge system matched up with what SpaceX was telling me, right? And we had these passionate statements from SpaceX, and we didn't have any evidence behind it. And luckily, in that situation, you can get some of these documents and permits and stuff, right? So I poured through all these documents, literally hundreds and hundreds of pages. One of them was like a 490-page PDF or something like that. Makes you think that the paperwork's crazy until you thumb through it and you're like, okay, most of this is like a no-brainer. It looks like it's a lot. It's intimidating, but it's not difficult to fill out. Looking at the documents, it didn't seem like the documents matched up with what SpaceX was telling us. Because there's this whole general permit, right? And in SpaceX's latest information, the blog post that they put out, they said that they were covered under the general permit. And so I'm like, well, what the heck is the general permit? That's confusing. What does it cover? How do you get one, et cetera, right? And so I dig into this wastewater general permit that you can operate if you're in certain industries in Texas. And it doesn't look like it applies to the deluge system. Like, it doesn't look like it applies to the things that SpaceX are doing there. SpaceX can do other things under that permit, but in order to operate that specific system, you have to have a specific type of permit that looks at that very different thing than anybody's really doing, right? So we did that. We looked through it. And we're like, wait a second. There's no real way that it looks like that should have covered that. I think on this page somewhere it should say general permit, or they operate under the general permit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, if you're covered under this general permit, maybe it's because TCEQ told you this, right? Like TCEQ, you were in a meeting and you sat down and they're like, nah, you're good. That's fine. That's covered under the general permit, right? If that would sort of match with what SpaceX is saying. Well, if that's the case, show me where you were told that. Like, tell me in a meeting on this date, TCEQ told us that we were covered, like deluge operations were covered under the general permit, right? All right, I didn't see that. Show me the letter or the email or whatever from the EPA or the TCEQ. It's a lot of letters to say, saying that, oh yeah, no, okay, you're okay to operate under that general permit. Like, show me that letter. Nowhere could I find that, right? What I did find was the EPA fining SpaceX for operating it in a way they weren't supposed to operate it, and TCEQ fining SpaceX for operating it in a way they weren't supposed to operate it, right? And you look through the actual investigation that was done, and during the investigation, they asked SpaceX to provide documentation of those things. SpaceX didn't provide it. They didn't provide a document that said, yeah, wow, we talked with TCEQ and they said the deluge was totally covered under this. Like, they didn't say that anywhere. They didn't show the email where TCEQ said that. Like, none of these things were backed up by actual evidence. What you did find was that the TCEQ found that they needed the permit that they didn't have. And TCEQ told them that they needed the permit that they didn't have. And like, it just keeps adding up over and over again. And in the end, TCEQ fined them for not having the permit that they were supposed to have, right? Just get the permit.
Well, they applied for it now.
They did.
Yeah,
Actually, they did apply for it.
And they have, I think it's October 17th, I think, is they have public hearings for the permit.
The fine was actually reduced.
Yeah.
Because it was supposed to be a $25,000 fine, and it turned into a much smaller fine. And there's like line items that sort of break out why it turned into this smaller fine, right? And one of them was, when we started the investigation, they had already infringed, they had already violated it, but they were trying to operate in good faith, and they've already applied for this permit. And then we got to the investigation 25 days later or something like that. So SpaceX knew that they needed the permit, and they applied for it. They just operated for a long time before they actually had the permit. And the fine was literally reduced down to a lower amount because SpaceX had applied for that permit after operating for X amount of time, and I guess knowing that they needed the permit, but operating anyways. That's curious to me, and it makes me look at things with more scrutiny. And not a lot of people like that, right? But when I hear one thing and I'm told one thing and I start to look at documents and I'm like, wait a second, these two things don't match up. I want to see more documents. I'm like, how many things don't match up here?
Like,
I don't know.
What I want to know is, did SpaceX ask if it actually did fall under the permit and ask if they needed a separate one? And what was the response? Or did they even ask at all? Because SpaceX has a history of, let's just say, not looking into what they need to look into regulation-wise.
Wait. No, you'd be blocking it in this view, but if you lean to one side, we would not see the vertical tank farm.
Yeah, there. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, and who might be new, when SpaceX originally built the vertical tank farm, those lovely, beautiful vertical tanks from the same Starship steel and then had the cryo shells on top of them, they figured, oh yeah, we'll stick all 8 tanks together like a Lego block, and we'll put the methane right in front of everything with no barrier walls, no space, no nothing.
Yep.
Turns out you can't do that. You need a little bit more space, but especially with large vertical methane tanks. Hot dog tanks are a little bit easier. You just need a barrier wall to do them, and that's what they have set up right there now. But vertical tanks, there's different regs that go along with it, and, well, yeah. So I'm kind of curious of if SpaceX actually asked whether or not they needed a separate permit, or if they were just told, or I want to know the story there. I don't know if we're going to know it, but I want to know that story.
My thing is that SpaceX could have provided that evidence in response to the fine, like the investigation for the violation. And if they had an email from the TCEQ investigator, inspector, whatever, that said, no, you're good, like that, you're fine, I don't think that they would have gotten fined. But I don't know that exists because they didn't provide it. Like, if I was SpaceX, why wouldn't I provide that? Like, totally, I talked with TCEQ. They told me I could do it this way. Here's where they told me in writing, because if I was SpaceX, I was sure as heck get that in writing, right? I just don't know why they wouldn't provide that evidence. But it goes back to the same thing. Like, provide not just the passion behind what you're doing, but bring the freaking receipts, right? And I hope that happens. I'm reading through, like, I see a bunch of comments, a lot of information. At the very least, the goal here isn't to say SpaceX good, SpaceX bad, SpaceX doesn't do things right. Like, that's not it. My big thing is, like, look for evidence. Like, look at facts first, and don't just make it up because somebody cried it out on social media or a congressperson gave an impassioned speech. I could give an impassioned speech about how Ship 26 is fantastic. It doesn't mean it's right. That's a very qualitative.
Hear that speech, Doss, and I will.
Qualitative argument.
Oh no! Here comes Kevin.
It's definitely a valid argument. Just saying.
No.
It is.
I had to come
No, it is
in.
not. No, it is not. Anyway,
it's not that. In D and Sawyer, by the way, I hope y'all are very comfortable. I want to see the facts and I want to see the evidence, and I don't want people to blow smoke up my skirt or pull the wool over my eyes or whatever. Like, just show me the receipts and then let me decide, like, yeah, that's nonsense. Really? Or, that actually seems like it's kind of reasonable.
Either
I don't know.
They're keeping stuff, or there is just almost no communication at all to figure this out, or I don't really know. It's just so many questions that we don't have answers to, and it's just one way or the other to come back all around. I mean, they're going to get a permit for it.
Yep.
They've got a public hearing for it. They'll likely get it. I mean, and then
I think so too.
I don't see why they wouldn't. It's just, and then my guess is that's why the tiered environmental assessment was supposed to have those public hearings.
Right.
But then got canceled and they haven't been rescheduled yet. Although I do find it kind of odd that the FAA didn't know about the whole TCEQ thing, but that's a whole whatever.
That's a whole other ball of wax.
Yeah, whatever. But
isn't that most likely the what came out in August that made the FAA take notice?
There was a lot of stuff happening around that in August. I mean, the investigation with TCEQ happened like end of July. I think it's like 24th, 25th through the 29th or 30th, like that time frame. And then the official letters sort of came out after that. And it was the middle of August where SpaceX is like accepting the agreed order with the TCEQ that's fining them this amount for operating without a permit, like all those sorts of things. It's happening right there in that very late July to early to mid-August timeframe. So was that like the tipping point or not? I don't know. Like, I just love to see what got submitted and when and draw my own conclusions. We just don't have that data right now. So it's like, geez.
Yeah, Das, you said you didn't want to go through documents and stuff, but you keep saying, I want to see the facts, and I am going to pull up a document because the government has facts. Now, we don't know if they're true, but the government does have facts that they're laying out and saying, these are the things that happened. This is when it happened. And, SpaceX doesn't have to play their case in the court of public opinion, but SpaceX also isn't being forthcoming with the facts in any of their statements.
Well, they're not including it, right? And I think there's an argument there that, if they put all the facts in there, it gets a little bit too confusing for people, right? But you're bringing up one of the documents that I looked at where when I say I want to see the facts, these are the facts I've gotten. I want more facts. I want facts from SpaceX's side too, right? But these are all the things finding when they used the deluge system and how many gallons of water were and weren't captured and that sort of stuff. One of the items in here, Kevin, if you scroll up just a little bit, one of the items says, I'm trying to see, is this the document where they didn't actually say how much water was used or captured in the deluge system during launch? Vaporized by heat aerodynamic forces, water-based.
72,600 gallons were not captured.
No, but there's one where SpaceX couldn't tell them. Maybe it's not this document, but it's another one.
There is another TCEQ document, which I can't find right now.
I went through, scroll up to the top. I thought it was the last one. Dynamic forces, discharge of the wetlands. See, I've looked at all this stuff before I came on this show. Like, I've read all these, which is why I wanted to come on the show.
The liquid oxygen spill. That's fun. For those
unauthorized nope, that's not it. Anyways,
that liquid oxygen spill right there. For those who don't know or remember the spin boom from Booster
spin boom.
from Booster 7, and then they proceeded to use the dump valves that are at the bottom of the booster, and they literally dumped basically a ring and a half or so or whatever of liquid oxygen out. Is what they basically did.
Yeah. It's interesting, and Kevin, I appreciate you bringing that up. I didn't want to make it a show where it's just like, here are all these documents, and we're line 3, page 4 of the document, right? Like, we're going to look at that now. Look what they said. I didn't want to make it that. Like, I want it to be more information. I've read through all of that stuff. I want even more stuff. I want to know what the larger environmental impact was that they told them about in mid-August. Like, what does that actually entail? Is it a big deal? Is it not a big deal? It's so difficult. Like, you can't make the determination on whether the paperwork is onerous or too much or too slow unless you look at the facts being fed into it, right? Like, you can't make that decision. You're not making a valid assessment of the paperwork or the process or anything like that if you don't look at the facts that are being fed into it. It's possible, there's certainly possible that you can improve the paperwork and you can streamline processes and stuff like that. Nobody should think that, it's perfect as is. That would be ridiculous to think, right? But you can't really have a valid opinion about whether the process is working or not unless you look at the facts on the inputs and the output sides. That's where I'm going with saying I want to see the facts. I'm reading chat. I'm going to read some chat here. How are we doing on time? We're so far past the time. Good grief. This is the part I should have done something at the beginning.
Yeah.
What is on fire? What are we playing here? Booster 7 testing.
Booster 7's been, I think it's like 5:26 and 55 seconds is one of the LOX dumps, because they did them through the night too. But I think that's one of them on that stream. But it was. They got fined for dumping a bunch of liquid oxygen because you can't just dump 36,000 gallons of liquid oxygen and not have but
and not have somebody take notice. Let me see here. Defending the FAA is sad, says T. Brookie. Time out. Like, the FAA just returned a Falcon 9 to flight in like a record time, an unhearable turnaround time after they had an anomaly on landing. The same thing with the second stage problem. They had a second stage problem, and the FAA turns that around in record time. Like, look at all the things that are happening. I don't need to defend one side or the other. I want to look at the facts and like make up my own informed opinions. I just don't want to have an uninformed opinion. It's not about defending one side or the other. I want to see the information. How many people am I saying this to live? 1,700 people I'm saying to this live. People just don't want to read the facts a lot of times. They just want to go with what they're told, or they want to hop on the popular bandwagon or the emotional bandwagon or whatever. I really want to look at the back end data, but not everybody has to be that way.
I've never liked the against FAA thing. I've never liked that because, I know what they do. I know the job that they're supposed to do, and they do it as well as they can with the resources that they have. It's a tale as old as time. Government agencies don't have enough money, and the FAA is short on money and short on people, just like everyone else. So things may take a little bit longer, but still, as Das was saying before, 60 days for another environmental review for a larger area, that's not that long.
I need to know what larger area is.
Yeah.
Right?
How much?
Like middle of August, larger environmental impact than previously calculated. What the heck does that mean? It's not 180 days, but 60 days seems short for that without having access to actually review the information. So there was a great question in chat, like, where do we draw the line, right? Like, between protecting the environment and protecting the public and pushing technology forward and enabling innovation and that sort of stuff. Where do you draw the line? It's really tough, right? Like, I don't want any possibility that the hot stage ring is going to plow into Isla Blanca Park, right? Like, review the aerodynamics. Anybody ever, what are those things? They have Frisbees that work that way. Like, it's a disc and you spin it like that and it flies a lot further than you think it's going to fly, right? There's things like that, but I just want to look at that and know that somebody's done the due diligence. If that's why I say if the difference is 1 mile or is it 15 miles, is it going toward shore? Is it coming away from shore? That's what I got to look at. It's still a long way out, right? It's still way out there. There has to be a balance, but I don't think anybody can just sit here and say like, oh yeah, well, 10% is okay, but 9% is not okay. Like there's so many different nuances to the safety, and I am personally more on the safety side than I am on the environmental side. And I'll say it out loud. Like we do so many things that impact the environment, and the things that SpaceX does at Starbase, I've said this on the stream before. Look at the litter on the beach. Look at the tar that washes up on the beach, right? From the offshore drilling and spills and all this sort of stuff that happens. And those impacts there along that little part of beach seem to me, from my own assessment, to be way more impactful on the environment than anything I've seen the rocket launch itself do, including the pad exploding, right? I think that the pad exploding had less impact on the environment at Boca Chica than the trash that washes up on the shore does, right? From a safety perspective, that's a whole different thing, because on the flip side, I've been under a rocket that did something anomalous. I have been standing at the press site underneath a SpaceX Falcon 9 booster when the boost back burn, or the whichever burn, the entry burn, was way shorter than we thought it was supposed to be. And I have been standing there looking up at the sky with my camera thinking, where the heck is this booster at? That doesn't look like it slowed it down enough. I am standing here 3 miles away from, it's not 3 miles away from the landing zone, but 3 miles away from the launch pad. It is a dark night, and I do not know where that rocket is coming down. And at that point, all I could do is just put my trust in the fact that somebody did the math, and I was safe standing where I was standing. Kevin was standing there as well, exactly.
As was I.
I'm talking too much. Somebody else talk. Sawyer, talk.
Doug,
Anybody other than
if I can jump in really quick, I was, you're talking about safety, and you reminded me of this moment, your famous moment of Flight 1. Did it just do a curveball? Dusk, I was sitting here in my control room thinking, holy shit, what if it hits the hotel? There were 4 of our team standing on top of the hotel that night. That's the stuff that scares me. And then, I'm trying to get it to change. This is the view from the hotel. You could see the pad.
It is.
It's so close.
That thing tumbling through the sky, and you're on top. I had my eyes on it there, Kevin, so I could see it, and it didn't seem to be getting bigger. It seemed to be getting smaller, so I was less concerned about that. But I'm more on the safety side of things. The environmental impact, I don't think they should just be pouring methane into the wetlands willy-nilly or whatever, but I see way too much trash on the beach to worry about some concrete getting tossed in sand dunes. Sawyer was going to say something. Somebody was going to say something other than me, please.
I was just saying that I was also at that one with you and Kevin, and Max and I at one point literally turned to each other and said, is that normal? And
yes.
It's like, I don't think so. Max and I had quite a conversation while it was coming back of, that seemed way too short, but it landed. Very different from, something like, say, you were talking about with CRS-16, where I wasn't at that one, but I was watching it. As it came down, you're like, all right, it's going to turn and land, and it was spinning. As it was coming down, it was literally spinning, and we're going, that definitely is wrong. As opposed to the other one where it's like, maybe that was no, this is wrong. And so when we saw that one not land and splash instead, it was like, okay, that safety feature's working. Just like with this one, when it did land, we're like, okay, that was scary, but it landed.
Yep. D is like in the dark now because the shit has gone on so long.
Here, I was bright out.
me and Dawes have been
turn
talking.
up my screen brightness a bit. I don't know how much that helped.
That actually helped a lot.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're just gonna show D.
There we go.
I gotta say though, with the VAB lit up in the background, it looks nice.
The VAB lit up in the background.
I love this place. It's beautiful.
There's no mosquitoes out there, are there?
There have been like 4.
Okay.
so
What is
far
counting?
that have bit me, but that's not bad comparatively. Yeah, it's a nice place. I love having the VAB as a background.
Nice. Oh, geez. Okay. Well, we have talked about a lot of stuff here. My face hurts a little bit from talking too much. I hope the takeaway is that get the facts, right? There's this whole thing about news and news sites and citizen journalism and all these things, like all these hot topics, free speech and stuff like that. Get the facts. Don't just base your opinions on other people's opinions, because it becomes the game of telephone, right? And I want to see the rockets fly. Everybody here wants to see rockets fly, right? Go show of hands. Who likes rockets?
Rockets flying is good.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody raise their hand there. But if you're going to have an opinion on something, don't just regurgitate something that somebody has told you. Don't regurgitate what I've told you. Don't regurgitate what SpaceX has told you. Don't regurgitate what anybody has told you. Like, get the facts and try to make your own opinions on things. This has been very filling, TFT.
That's a good one.
It's been very filling.
You know, the last
For a
hour
certain
has
max
been
heat.
really chill for me, minus the moment of excitement of the stage 2. I've just been hanging out.
I've just been laying here. Oh wait, no, I've been doing that the whole show for like
You've been doing the
3
whole
straight
Yeah.
weeks, 4 straight weeks
It's-
now.
I want to see
Okay.
Flight 5 go.
I want to see Flight 5.
I
want-
see
I
it
want
go.
Flight-
Whether they go for a catch or they just fly it. Can they just fly?
Fly it.
I just want them to fly. That's all I want. Whether they go for a catch or not, which I mean, eventually they will. But even
Yeah.
if they flew Flight 5 and didn't go for a catch, it's still a Starship flight.
Yeah.
So you know.
I want like Flight 4.1 and 4.2, and then we're going to be scrambling. Like, what do we do with patches for Flight 4.1 and 4.2? We have Flight 5 patches. They talk about a catch. No spoilers
we-
there.
Whoops. Oops.
Oh, jeez. Anyways, y'all. Some support real quick. Over here, we did get a super chat. Musical Wolves says, at least it's not landing on villages like Long March 5 Bingo.
Oh.
That is the other end of the scale, right? Without FAA, you get Chinese rocket launches and orange clouds descending upon villages. Anyways.
Yeah. Or static fires that don't stay static.
Oh,
static fires that
Dynamic
don't stay
fires.
static.
Dynamic
fires.
Also known as launches.
That's a pretty good word for it, D. That's a pretty good word for it.
Hey, look, let's answer this real quick. Why did SpaceX choose that site knowing it was surrounded by nature reserves? Well, it's better than choosing a site that's surrounded by, like, I don't know, people that live there, right? Like a populated area. Nature reserves tend to be unpopulated areas. And when it comes down to the land usage,
Look
you
at Kennedy.
generally know there's not a lot of safety population around. It's the environmental population, right? Plus, tip of Texas, different state, orbital mechanics,
I mean,
rockets. Go ahead.
just look at Kennedy Space Center.
Yep.
It's a ton of nature reserve around there. I mean,
Yeah.
That is the Merritt Island Wildlife Reserve. Yeah.
So I mean, it's not like it's the only the site that's built around a wildlife reserve. So I mean, there's a pretty big it's a pretty big one over in Merritt Island. So
Yep, they're like huge wildlife refuges all around the area. So, anyways, there's also a ton of experience, I guess, working at KSC. Like, you look at the problems, air quotes problems, the scrutiny that Boca Chica goes through, and you think that KSC hasn't been through all that, like that, and then some for launching rockets out of KSC. So, I'm sitting here waving around my water molecule. It's like my fidget toy on my desk.
Is that a Snetum?
It is. Yes. Look, I have what is this? This is a normal oxygen, and this is a water, and I have some methane on my desk as well, so I can do
that's
like
so
rocket
cool.
chemical reactions.
I've followed from the release date of those. I've not gotten some myself, but
They're great fidget toys for the desk because the magnets, like, you can snap them together and they're very satisfying, and then you can like spin them and take them apart and snap them back to. It's like I have them all over my desk right now. We need like an
the
Amazon
EPA is
affiliate
gonna have
link.
a word with you about how to safely handle oxygen and methane.
My methane spill. I don't.
I mean,
that's not methane. Oh gosh.
If we want to talk
Don't let them
about,
get into a stoichiometric ratio.
if you want to talk about something else, even just Starship, I mean, heck, we might see a Ship 31 static fire soon.
Oh hey.
You know, I mean, that's Flight 6, so and on top of that, with this this delay,
Yeah.
the Booster 13 static fire, so maybe both Flight 6 vehicles are static fired before Flight 5 even flies.
Yeah.
I'd like that. I'd go for that.
Yep. I want to see the rockets fly.
Yeah.
I don't think we should just do stuff willy-nilly, completely willy-nilly. There's got to be a balance, but I need more facts. Like, I want to make an informed opinion about it, but it's so hard to get the facts from both sides. So,
If I can talk about something totally different,
sure.
The launch yesterday. We had the Bluebird launch.
Yes.
And that was a really neat launch. But the thing that particularly was cool to me, beyond the boost back burn, which is my favorite part, is that SpaceX is launching more competitive services to themselves.
Yeah.
They were launching 5 satellites that will compete with their sort of direct-to-cell situation.
Yeah. It's money for SpaceX. I mean,
yeah, I love seeing that sort of thing, and it was exciting.
Oh, go ahead.
It also helps that single launch for a competitor probably allowed them to launch, 5 Starlink missions or some absurd number like that.
Wait, Trevor, you can't just hop on the stream and talk. You're not being piped through anywhere. Like nobody, that's not a thing, dude.
So apologies for the silence there.
Yeah. Sorry, D, I laughed because I read chat. Where was it? Who was it in chat?
I was laughing too.
If it was methane, it would be igniting in the flare stack. Echo Deal said if it was methane, it would be igniting in the flare stack. And that's why I laughed out loud.
I knew I was
live
missing
right
something.
now. It's okay. It didn't go out live.
Bingo, right in the center. Another one of my favorite Jack quotes.
Oh, you know what they should do with SpaceX launching all their competitors? They need to put some Starlinks on New Glenn.
That would be cool.
It'd be funny.
Huh.
Why not?
That's an interesting idea. Starlinks on New Glenn.
And put Kuiper on Falcon
put Kuiper
9.
sets.
Yeah.
Yup.
Yeah, why not? It's money.
Okay. We have been talking since 5. It's now 8:12. That's 3 hours and almost 15 minutes worth of show. In the YouTube comments, you're going to be like, oh, I'm not going to watch 3 hours of rambling. It's like, come on, this was a live show. You're just watching the VOD. If you want quick space news, watch This Week in Spaceflight or watch our Starbase update or something like that. Like, this is a different format. This is our rambling format where we just hang out and we have honest conversations with people. For the folks who have hung in for all 3 hours here, we appreciate. Oh, they stick to my ring too, by the way. Like, you just stick them to my ring because my ring is actually made of meteorite. Like, my wife and I got a meteorite and do what?
Would you call that a molecular bond?
For my ring, my meteorite ring.
The molecule was sticking to. It was bonding to it because it was sticking to.
That's good.
No.
Thank you.
That's a stretch for me. Anyways, my meteorite ring has meteorite iron in it, and it sticks to my ferrous meteorite ring. So anyways, the whole show that we've done here, we hope that y'all hung out the entire time and were able to learn something. Do we have an outro thing? Did we talk about everything we're supposed to talk about?
I think so.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we have some people to thank, but yeah.
Should we bring up the thanking of the people real quick? And say thanks to all the people in the membership program. It'll be just a second. Don't worry about that. There we go. Thanks to the members. The launch directors and other folks. There we go. Flight engineers. That font just keeps getting smaller and smaller. We appreciate you hanging out with us. Secret Train Car says that was awesome. First time finishing a Flame Trench marathon. Thanks for bringing a new perspective on the whole FAA thing. Well, we appreciate you hanging out with us, Secret Train Car. What else do we need to do?
The gifts.
Play some gifts.
Let's see some gifts.
Oh my gosh.
Shout out to LSR from our social media team, which if you're not following our social medias, what are you doing? Check them out. X,
Nice.
Facebook, Instagram, all of those.
Like my Sawyer gifts here. I want to shake people and get them to like rockets. Like I just want to shake them.
So LSR said he's sorry because it was a very on the rails episode. So
Was it on the rails episode?
You know, I think that's fair. It's understandable. I don't know if I really even had any gifable moments.
We'll see if you're in here.
Jumping in and turning around for the stage 2. Maybe, I don't know.
It's like, this is me to SpaceX.
Nice.
Like, SpaceX, launch Starship. There, launch it.
Starships
Starships are
going
meant
back
to
and forth. Should we end
Yeah.
this? Should we not? I don't know. It's two sides.
I just want to weigh the evidence. I think that was me weighing the evidence is what I was doing. Anyways, y'all, thank y'all so much for the support. We like talking about stuff. Like we said, these are the live shows. You may not like the opinions we have sometimes, but maybe it makes you think just a little bit more. So we're going to sit here and have honest conversations with you and let you know what we think. We're going to hopefully base it on some facts. We get emotional too, right? But that is who we are. That's what we do. You know how to find your way back to our little corner of the internet if you ever deem to do so. But we appreciate it when you do. Yeah, I juggle the evidence. That's what we were doing. We're juggling the evidence. I believe that is going to bring us to the end of our show this Friday evening. Sawyer, thanks for being here with us.
Always a pleasure. Hopefully, again, soon I'll be a little more upright each show. So keep an eye out as my strong back slowly goes up.
Goes into the upright position. We'll verticate Sawyer here slowly but surely. Thank you for hanging in there on the show, Sawyer. We appreciate
Thanks
you as
for
always.
having me.
We've got D as well. D, a pleasure.
Of course, always a fun time here in the Flame Trench, especially in front of the VAB.
Nice. All right. And also with us, Ryan.
Yeah, it's always fun to get on and get into the weeds of Starship. Always is. I mean, there's so much to it and so much to that program. It's always fun to get into it.
Hey, we want to see it fly, that's for sure. We appreciate you bringing some more perspective over here to the show. Kevin Michael Reed is going to display his own image up there at the top of the screen as a reminder that we should thank Kevin Michael Reed for pushing the buttons and providing some commentary, actually, here this evening. We couldn't make these shows happen without Kevin and the team of producers producing them in the background. Y'all know me. My salty name is Das. That's my made-up internet name. My real name is John Galloway. Is over there, wherever it says. We appreciate y'all hanging out with us. Like I said, hope you gain some new perspective. Just think it through, because truly we are living in a wondrous time right now. Commercial spacewalks, violins in space, boosters coming back to land, huge things taken off from private locations like Starbase, Boca Chica. It is a time to be alive. But that's going to be the Flame Trench for this week, and we will see you nerds later. Thanks for watching, y'all.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
RCPA chamber pressure looks good.
Rolling up. Roger, planet.
Water towers, fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Fighting downside FD off. Bring in FD off. It's orange!
R45! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
What is it?
Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You good? Sure. We don't need any more of these.